Thank you for waiting, everybody. I'm here. Welcome. We're going to have another late night conversation. So glad that you're all here. And yeah, we're going to jump right into it. So, some nights I don't start as early as I'd like to. And, I think it's always better to stream than not stream. So here I am. And, we're going to talk. Good to see you.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Some nights it's easier than others. Some days it's easier than others to get on here. But, I made a commitment to do the stream. And I do feel it is better to do the stream. It's getting to be fall, right? And I'm a little one day. And, I got a friend coming in out of town. Shout out to you. Really glad you're here. You're here. Going to be doing something. This weekend, which is pretty exciting. And yeah, that should be good. And I got a lot going on, but I want to be here with all of you because you all are great. And that's the great thing about YouTube streaming is I can do it from my lovely Brooklyn apartment. So here I am. Thank you all for waiting. I'm starting an hour later than I usually start. And I intended to start tonight. And, it's just how these things go. But thanks for being here, you all. Thank you for being here. Now, the way this works is I give my opening remarks followed by the roll call, and then I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of our show, all you need to do is send a Rumble rant. You can cash at me at CalebMoppin22, but the absolute best way to get me talking in the second half of the show is to buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee. That's the best thing to do. Like I said, I got a few things to talk about here tonight. Might go for a little while, might go for longer, might go for shorter, but, it's for the best that we're here. In terms of announcements, check out the CPI website. We're posting a lot of articles on there these days. Penny wrote a great article about her interventions that she carried out in Minnesota at the No Kings rallies. It's always great, always appreciated. We got a new article on there about the Revolutionary Communist Party and their planned provocation coming up on November 5th. And as I've been saying for the past month, and hopefully we'll have the registration up soon. That's part of, January 11th, mark your calendar. That will be the big event. We're going to be having a big event in New Jersey to kick off the year of 2026. It'll be at a hotel in New Jersey, an undisclosed location for those who register. Shouldn't be too far from New York City. So if you're available on January 11th, if you're on the East Coast, come on down. The CPI board will be in town, and it's going to be a great event to kick off the new year. Everyone who comes will get a copy of the CPI, the book of the convention that we did, the coffee table book we put out of last year's convention. We'll announce the details about next summer's convention, and our anti-imperialist movement will just keep marching ahead, and it's going to be great. So January 11th in New Jersey, mark your calendar. Check out the Center for Political Innovation website. You can always join the Center for Political Innovation. Membership is always, something we appreciate in CPI. If you become a member, that, gets you plugged into internal activities and all kinds of stuff like that. That's always a lot of fun to become a member. New memberships are always something we're very happy to see. And there have been quite a few new memberships actually in the last couple of weeks. And we're glad to see it. We're glad to see it. if you are a member, be sure to check your spam folder, because as members, you get announcements of every week's meetings. So make sure you check your spam folder if you are a member, so that you can get invited to the weekly membership meetings. And then from there, we can connect you into the chat groups and all of that, right? It was a process. We got to be careful. We don't just, you have to kind of join and connect with people. It's a process, and it's always tricky, but we're building a good organization. It's getting better at doing what we're doing. So on that note, as I said before, this will be following our usual format, which is first the opening remarks, then the roll call, then I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, all you need to do is send a Rumble rant, a Rockfin, all right, a Cash App, Caleb Moppin 22, or you can buy me a coffee. Yeah, that's the great thing. So I see Richard Unanimous already sent a coffee, which is a good question, which I'll be answering in the second half of the program. Second half of the program is me answering your questions. So send good questions, get me talking in the second half of the show. So folks, I said before, I am somewhat disappointed by the start and stop nature of the negotiations that are taking place. We in CPI have been supporting Russia from day one. We have been the biggest supporters of Russia since the special military operation began. We've been in the streets saying Russia is not our enemy. That has been our message, and we have done quite a bit to say that Russia is not our enemy. This war is a creation of the neocons, and that it doesn't benefit the United States. That has been our main message. Might be good to just kind of review all of what we have done. The special military operation started in 2022. It's now 2025. So it's been 3 years. And 3 years, we have just been on the front lines saying Russia is not our enemy. So yeah, I'll just kind of review all that we've done over the course of the last 4 years. Then I'll get into where we're at. This is our organization. Keep in mind, this is the Center for Political Innovation.
Russia is not our enemy. Russia is not our enemy. Russia is not our enemy.
The energy revenue to rebuild the industries of Russia, and he made Russia once again a strong economy. And that is why U.S. media demonizes Russia. That is why the U.S. government toppled the government of Ukraine in 2014 with the Euro-Maidan coup and installed a fanatically anti-Russian regime in Kiev. I saw a CNN reporter claim that Ukraine was a peaceful country until now. Well, this is the monument in Donbass to all the children who have died of the shelling and the bombing being carried out by the U.S.-backed regime in Kiev. 14,000 plus people dead, children who have died. It hasn't been a peaceful country. The people of Donbass have been subject to 8 years of bombing, 8 years of shelling, 8 years of a food blockade. And Russia is now moving in to protect them and bring an end to this. The Wall Street money sharks hate Russia. They hate China, Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, and many other countries because they have governments that stand up to the international bankers and their monopolistic corporations.
And it's not a good situation. People are dying and it needs to end. And we need there to be a negotiation. We want there to be peace in Ukraine, and that means that our leaders sit down and negotiate. It doesn't mean that Boris Johnson gets on the phone and wrecks a peace deal just because he wants people to keep dying.
Global food crisis spawned by a war.
That's right. Russia is not our enemy. 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 enemy. Russia is not our 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 enemy. Russia was with us in the fight against the Nazis in World War II. At the moments when America shows its true colors and is standing up for justice and truth, you'll notice that we're standing with Russia.
Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. It's time to stand for peace here at the United Nations. We are marching up to the religious rally. Russia and China are not our enemy. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. 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 Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia.
Youth festivals are very, very important to my organization in particular, the Center for Political Innovation. Every meeting that we have, we begin with the pledge. We've changed the word youth for people because we have people of all ages, but we begin, we raise our right hands, we pledge that we shall remember this unity forged at the end of the Second World War, not only today, not only this year, this week, but always, and the pledge goes on. But that is such a beautiful pledge that came out of the World Democratic Youth Federation. And I must say that the youth festivals represent the best, not just of this country, but of America. A time when we stood in solidarity with Russia to defeat fascism. And they're trying to erase that from American history.
I'm Caleb Maupin, the chair of the U.S. delegation, and he also represents the Center for Political Innovation.
Welcome, everybody. My name's Caleb Maupin. I'm the founder of the Center for Political Innovation. And in October, I was deeply honored when the youth office of the Russian Foreign Ministry reached out to me about forming a national preparatory committee for the upcoming World Youth Festival set for March in Russia. As someone who attended the World Festival of Youth and Students in 2013 in Quito, Ecuador, someone who attended the festival that was held in Sochi in 2017, as an advocate of socialism, peace, and international cooperation, as an American patriot, as a Christian, and someone who strives to live according to the teachings of Jesus Christ, I considered this to be a great opportunity. However, it is the circumstances of our upcoming trip that bring us here today. As we meet here today, Jesse Neville, Penny Hess, and Omali Yeshitela have been indicted by the U.S. Department of Justice. They are facing a possible 15 years in prison. Their trial date was just set for September. The Biden administration has charged them for doing what we are about to do, for going to an international conference in Russia. I'm the leader of the United States delegation. I'm representing the Center for Political Innovation. And I would like to just thank you from the bottom of my heart for that dynamic interview you gave to Tucker Carlson, in which you showed many, many young Americans a different kind of leadership, because our politicians and our leaders in the United States, they speak in sound bites, they speak in terms of scandal and gossip, but you presented a long-term vision, a scientific view of statecraft, and by getting through to young Americans, you made a difference. Many people who would never have listened to anything you had to say or heard another perspective heard you because of that interview. Now, getting to my question, things between our two countries are not good at this point. You know, before we left, we had to have a press conference at the United Nations. We are concerned about being prosecuted. There are 3 Americans that have already been charged and are facing prosecution, possibly 15 years in prison, simply because they attended a conference like this in Russia, the Yahoo movement they're called. And we are concerned because I know
that I speak for the majority of the American people when I say that we do not want our tax money dumped into this conflict in Ukraine any longer. We do not want our country to continue to deteriorate internally while our leaders waste money on prolonging this war. I'm frightened by what the Biden administration is doing, not just in Ukraine, but also on Taiwan and on the Korean Peninsula. And I really do see gatherings like this as a potential road to peace. And what I have seen at this festival has blown my mind. The amount of young volunteers that you have here, people who have stepped up, who love their country and want to just come forward and put together dynamic events like this. What kind of role can events like this and young diplomacy activities like this play in helping set the stage for maybe changing the dangerous direction our leaders in the United States are taking things against the majority of the wishes of the majority of the people of our country? Thank you.
The United States of America is a huge and unique country in its own way. Over 300 years, in just 300 years, which is a small period of time compared to our history, but thanks to the talents of the Americans, it became a superpower, which is an obvious fact. We know outstanding American politicians, we know outstanding American business people, cultural activists, which is an obvious fact. We used to be allies during 2 world wars as we fought Nazism and fascism. What happened recently? After the war, after the alliance, the United States and the Soviet Union started dividing the world, and they did so successfully. And based on this balance of powers, they created international relations and created the modern system of international law. Then the Soviet Union ceased to exist for a number of reasons. I will not go into detail, but they were mainly internal reasons. There is one superpower remaining, represented by your country. The way your elites use this monopoly to global domination is dubious. In my opinion, the United States failed to bear this burden of responsibility that they happen to bear. They created monopoly, strengthened it. I don't mean the American people, I mean the ruling elites. While strengthening their monopoly, they soon faced a situation where the overwhelming majority of countries disliked it. And so, step by step, it became obvious to everyone that there is resistance to the forming global order.
All right, so we're here at Trump Tower.
They told you these people are horrible. They told you these people are terrible, that they will never do anything good for us. There's a reason for that. It's called money. It's called power. They want to weaken you mentally. They want to capture your spirit, stomp you out, and tell you, why bother? Why get out of bed in the morning? Why do anything worthwhile? No.
Get great again. This was a great moment when Trump talked to Kim Jong-un and started the process of peace on the Korean Peninsula. And we want to see peace not just with North Korea, but with Russia, with China, with many countries around the world. It is outrageous that billions of dollars is being spent on prolonging the war in Ukraine when our people can't get relief in North Carolina. People are left behind in Georgia and North Carolina. They can't get any relief they need. This is outrageous. Our government is more concerned with waging wars around the world than for caring for our own people. And we need a president who will put America first, a president who will bring peace around the world. Only peace can make America.
Big crowd of people, huge crowd of people here to support Donald Trump, pouring in to watch the inauguration ceremony in the Capital One Arena. Yeah, we set up here over
I'm good. I'm good. It was fun to pass out pamphlets at the hotel there. Everybody was asking for more.
Great. Excellent.
We need to heal America as well. We need to pray for America. We need to make our country great again. We need to take over. The people need to take over to make our country better again. And I hope Trump can help us with that.
Donald Trump for one of the greatest moments of his first presidency, when he went to a country that America has technically been at war with since the 1950s and gave peace a chance. We want to make peace around the world.
Yeah, and it didn't stop. So as you saw there, we were at the inauguration. We were out in front of Madison Square Garden. We were marching in the streets of New York City. We went to Russia and we spoke with the Russian president. We had a United Nations press conference. We just kept going, but it continued, right? That was in January. We were at Trump's inauguration. We handed out thousands of booklets and, we were in the streets, but it didn't stop there. Did not stop there. I guess I'll show you the next little bit if I can find it here. We kept going. We certainly kept going. And we've had national days of action. And we have been in the streets, and then we were in the streets to support the Alaska peace talks. We were in the streets of Chicago. We had a convention in Chicago themed around peace with Russia, opened with Russian dancers. We just have been relentless about this. We want to see the Ukraine war end. We have been the loudest voice on this issue by far. There are a lot of people who say they agree with us, and a lot of people that do agree with us. But they haven't been anywhere near as loud as we have been on this issue. Right. So that was the inauguration. And after the inauguration, this was in February of this year.
To support peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. We have confronted our government multiple times.
We don't need this war. We might not agree everything what Trump is doing, but we need peace. I don't want my child to be going in a war that's not ours. Our tax dollars not coming in our country. The infrastructure is crappy. There's holes all over Chicago.
A few people walking by, they look at the banner and they're trying to figure out if we're on the red team or the blue team, and they can't quite figure it out. Well, we're not on any team. We're on the team of the American working families. We're on the team of the American people. We're on the peace team. That's what team we're on.
Talks between Trump and Putin are the most important thing in the world right now. Way more important than anything these stupid rallies have been demanding. Hands off this, hands off that. We need hands off the thermonuclear button.
People have been very excited to hear something that isn't directly partisan, but rather demanding things that they need and want as people. It seems to me like people are very receptive of a message that is less oriented towards telling them which team to vote for.
Hands off the button. Hands off the button. Peace with Russia, no war with Iran. Peace with Russia, no war with Iran. Peace with Russia, no war with Iran. Hands off the button.
Yeah, and then when the peace talks started, we've been continuing to be out in the streets. Might as well remind you of that, right? We were in the streets of New York City on the day that the peace talks happened, August 15th, the day of the Putin-Trump summit. We were in the streets. We were out in the streets supporting the summit and thanking Tulsi Gabbard for making it possible.
We are in extreme historic times right now. President Trump is currently in the great state of Alaska, attempting to make peace between the United States and Russia.
If what's happening today in Alaska will get us closer to peace, that's what we want. That's what we want. And when the president of Russia got off his plane, I saw American reporters shouting hostile questions. It's almost like they don't want peace. They don't want peace. It's really awful.
Have a moment of reflection that I call a prayer. Pray for peace. And as my faith is Christian faith, so I would like to do the prayer in my faith tradition.
This is our city, our beloved New York, and we say finally it's time for peace in America. Our hard-earned tax dollars should no longer be going to a foreign Eastern European country that has chosen the path of destruction in needless war.
All these killings, how Jesus feels about all these endless wars. Jesus came to save the world, to bring the peace of God to the world. Who is the father or mother who has ever remained, who would ever be happy or remain indifferent as the children are engaged in bloody wars?
President Trump wouldn't have been able to even have this meeting if Tulsi Gabbard hadn't revealed that Russiagate was a complete hoax, that there was no Russian meddling in the 2016 election, that they made that up not just to go after President Trump, but to stop peace, to put Trump in a position where he couldn't do what he's doing today and make peace and reconciliation with Russia.
We really thank once again those two presidents, President Donald Trump and President Vladimir Putin, for initiating that peace talk. Many people may not agree with them right now, but down the road that result will manifest because killing will be stopped.
But President Trump and President Putin are discussing a tunnel connecting the United States to Russia over the Bering Sea. Think about all the jobs that would create. The Bering Sea tunnel, the Bering Strait tunnel. Thousands of Americans could be hired, thousands of Russians, and two countries that have been at odds with each other could be connected through the Bering Strait tunnel. It's a beautiful, beautiful vision.
So, we support peace talks in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Wow. And also make world peace together.
Yes.
Amen.
Very good.
Yeah. So as you can see, we've been out there. Now, there was going to be a follow-up meeting of the Alaska meeting, right? The Alaska summit happened. It was a great step forward. And then there was going to be a follow-up meeting in Budapest. But that meeting was called off. We did hear some remarks from Russian President Putin. As you saw, not only was the meeting canceled, they imposed new sanctions on Russia today. And those new sanctions that were imposed, they were specifically targeting oil companies. And the two major Russian oil companies, Rosneft and Luka, I think, which is a smaller oil company in Russia. It's not the big state-controlled one. Both of them were hit with sanctions that are making it harder for Russia to export its oil. This is what Russian President Putin said about it today.
Our oil and our petroleum product will be removed from the global market. The prices will grow, and we discussed it with my American counterpart. It will result into the spike, in the upsurge in the fuel, in the energy, including at the gas stations, including the U.S. The United States will not be excluded from this. And if we look at the calendar, the political calendar in the U.S., we can understand how sensitive these matters are. And if such decisions are made, we need to understand who will benefit from those. But for us, it is important that we feel confident, we feel stable, and despite some losses that we will obviously face due to a number of circumstances, our energy sector feels quite confident.
Yeah. When you remove oil from the market, the price of oil goes up, right? The less of a commodity that's available, the more expensive it is. Basic economics, supply and demand. The less of something, the higher the price. The more of something, the lower the price. And you'll notice that, the highest oil prices in world history took place after the USA invaded Iraq and blew Iraq to bits. It resulted in the highest oil prices in history. And then under Barack Obama, we had the 2014 oil price drop that he engineered with Saudi Arabia. I actually gave a talk about manipulation of the oil markets in Brazil that we put out as a pamphlet, Oil in the Capitalist Crisis. There's a video of that. It's something that I've followed closely. One of the people who mentored me kind of helped me learn about the international oil markets, about the four super majors and how all of this works. And it's really important. Oil is the most important commodity on the international markets. And so, putting huge sanctions on two oil companies in Russia is going to drive the price of oil up. We're all going to pay for it at the gas tank. It's a really stupid move. Trump said he just felt like it was time. Well, that's a dumb move, you know, and we're all going to pay for it at the gas tank. China has already reduced the amount of oil it buys from Russia because of this. Not good. Not good. China denounced the sanctions and said that unilateral sanctions are not acceptable. And then the Russian president, though, he's not saying that the talks are over. This is what he said about the meeting in Budapest that was canceled.
Statements by the President of the United States. Well, what can I say? During the latest phone conversation, and both the summit itself and its location were suggested by the American side, and I agreed to this. But I expressed my thoughts to this regard, and I said, obviously, summits like these need to be prepared well, both for myself and for the U.S. president. It would be a mistake to approach it light-mindedly and not to have any results, any outcome after such a summit. And the U.S.
Yeah, so the USA asked for the meeting. The USA set the space. Then the USA backed out. Yeah, so they're playing games here, and it's disappointing. It's disappointing.
I heard the statement that the U.S. president decided to cancel or postpone the summit. More likely he's speaking about postponing the summit. Well, what can I say? Dialogue is always better than confrontation, dispute, or especially war. So we always supported this continuation of dialogue, and we continue to support this. As for...
Yeah. I mean, we don't know what is happening behind closed doors. We really, really don't. We do know that Trump did announce that they will not be sending Tomahawk missiles, that basically the Ukrainians can't shoot off the Tomahawk missiles by themselves. The Americans would have to shoot them off for them, and they're not going to do that. And that's really good that Tomahawk missiles are not being included. The Russian president has made clear that would have dramatic results.
Attempt of escalation. If such weapons is used to strike the territory of the Russian Federation, the response will be very serious. It will be overwhelming even. Let them think about it.
Yeah, so that's where we're at. The meeting has been postponed, but it's the USA that asked for the meeting and set the place of the meeting and then called it off. And the White House is being inconsistent. Now, I want to draw your attention quickly here to Congresswoman Paula Luna. Now, she is a Republican, and she has suddenly, out of the blue, she's just kind of suddenly become, Paulina Luna, I think is her name. Yeah, Paulina Luna, right? Anna Paulina Luna, right? She's a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. I don't even know what state she's from. What state? From Florida. She's a Republican. And suddenly she has become the peace advocate with regards to Russia. Very interesting, right? I mean, it makes me think she saw what Marjorie Taylor Greene was saying. She saw what other people were saying, maybe what Tucker Carlson was saying. And she has come out. She is one of the biggest advocates of peace with Russia. Very interesting. You know, she's in Florida. There is a big Russian community in Florida, right? St. Petersburg, Florida is where the Russian Community Center used to be. There used to be a really big Russian community center there. There's a lot of Russian Americans who live there. So this is what she said on Fox News today.
Action to these sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil. Listening to the president just a short while ago, he simply said, you have conversations with Putin that then don't go anywhere. And it just sounds like the president and all the people in his administration are just tired of just the talk and the no walk in terms of ending this war.
Well, I'd like to be the first to say that President Trump, as you know, is very fair. And part of the reason why he's been so effective at these other negotiations, you know, the 8 other previously that resulted in peace deals, is ultimately because of the fact that A, he's very firm, very respected, but also two, he knows how to cut a deal. And I think that, you know, the president's same sentence also said that he was not going to be giving any of the Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine because he didn't want to escalate the war. And so he's being very firm in his position. What I will say is that the president is actively engaged in talks and has always had a good relationship, a respectful relationship with the president of Russia. In the same sense, Kirill Dmitriev, who's Russia's special envoy to the United States in regards to some of these peace talks, has also extended, you know, open communication and has maintained a very good relationship with Steve Wynkoff. So there's a lot that happens behind closed doors. You know, generals will always talk to generals that the American people might not see. But what I will,
and that's what I do want to remind us all about. There's a lot going on behind closed doors. We have no idea what's going on. You know, I saw that Trump mentioned the Bering Strait tunnel. That's very exciting. No Tomahawks, but new sanctions on the oil company. Meeting postponed.
that I have faith that the president will indeed secure a peace deal. And I think that this is all part of that. Remember, President Trump has also vocally said that if Russia does agree to a peace deal, that he would consider trade. I think trade could be a great option for Russia and an incentive for them to end the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, so very, very interesting. Now, you know, this Paulina Luna, Anna Paulina Luna, she also has been saying some other interesting things. She commented about the KGB files on Lee Harvey Oswald that the U.S. government had and kept classified for so long and is now made public. I thought this was worth commenting on as well.
Doesn't want this to be out.
I think a lot of people were hesitant of it. And rightfully, I think, you know, questioning about the timing, but a lot of people are like, well, how did you manage, you know, we've been trying to get this for years. Like, how all of a sudden did you go in and just grab these? Well, it's called, I picked up the phone and I asked for them and I met in person. And I think there's a lot, you know, I can now understand how world wars start because I've worked with some of these old walruses in Washington and sometimes they don't want to talk to each other or it's a pride thing.
It's funny, walruses, you immediately think of John Bolton because he literally looks like a walrus with his mustache.
And I am a lot younger than the Cold War is. And so I was able to pick up the phone and talk to the ambassador and he met with me. And it was actually the president of Russia that decided to declassify this in an attempt also to provide transparency with what President Trump did with his executive order.
So, yeah, so we now have the KGB files on Lee Harvey Oswald, who, you know, Lee Harvey Oswald, the guy who killed Kennedy, he went and lived in the Soviet Union for a while. He was in the U.S. military in Germany. He walked over the border and he lived in Ukraine for a while, worked in a tractor factory, had a Ukrainian wife. Then he came back to the United States and killed Kennedy. And so the KGB obviously did a huge investigation into him. And so Russia recently made those files available. So, you know, I can only say that we are going to keep being out in the streets calling for peace with Russia. We're going to keep doing it. We are not going to back down and we're going to keep doing what we're doing. And, you know, I was just over there last week and I'm sure I'll be back there again soon. And our member Noah was at Intervision, the Russian sponsored songwriting competition that just happened. Go read Noah's article about it. Go watch the video. Noah did a great job at Intervision. And we're just going to keep advocating for peace because that is the best we can do. And I will say it's not okay to just sit back and say, oh, it's hopeless. Oh, you trust Trump. No, any opening for peace, any possible opening for peace, we got to jump on it. We got to jump on it. Yes, this year has felt like decades. I've said before, I feel like we're in an Empire Strikes Back moment to make a crude Star Wars reference. But we just got to jump on any possibility of peace. And we just got to loudly just keep beating the drum of peace with Russia. Now, there's two other things I wanted to talk about tonight before we go to the questions. This next one is, I'm going to take you to South Korea. Right now in South Korea, an 82-year-old woman who has been the main advocate for peace with North Korea is in prison. And they have swept her up. They're doing a corruption sweep, basically. The more liberal party is in power in South Korea, and the conservative party has, you know, lost the last elections. And so now the Liberal Party is going after churches and pastors. And Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, this is her with Kim Il Sung, and she and her late husband, the Reverend Sun Young Moon, they were the primary investors in North Korea. They set up the state-run car company in North Korea. Their newspaper was the only English language newspaper to ever have a exclusive interview with Kim Il Sung, the Washington Times. They're big friends of North Korea, and they were big advocates for Trump meeting with North Korea. They set up Think Tank 2020, and they were all over the world lobbying for there to be negotiations with North Korea. They're North Korea's best friends in South Korea. You know, a lot of the communists that used to support North Korea don't support them anymore. But the Unification Church, on the basis of their love of Korea and their desire to see Korea reunified, they have been the best friends of North Korea since the fall of the Soviet Union. Very anti-communist church historically, but after the fall of the Soviet Union, they believed in reconciliation and forgiveness, and they became huge investors in North Korea and huge advocates of improving relations. Now, Hak Jahan Moon has been swept up in a corruption charge that is malarkey. But the details of her incarceration are particularly shocking. And this video has been circulating. This is by the leader of their church in the United States. And I just want to show you this video. I want to show it to you because it's a bit shocking. It really is. And when you see this, you'll know what I'm talking about. It shows you, like, this is not simply a matter of, they arrested somebody, right? I mean, this is some pretty serious stuff. And I got to remember what the video is called. Hold on. Let me pull up the video. I mean, this is an 82-year-old woman who just had heart surgery, right? She just had heart surgery. And in this video, Reverend Dunkley, who's frequently going to South Korea to meet with her and to meet with the people there in South Korea that are trying to arrange her legal defense, he basically laid out in this video the conditions under which this 82-year-old woman who just had heart surgery is being held. And I just want you to see this. I mean, this is, it's a little bit hard to watch, but here you go.
Of Peace is currently being held in a detention center in Seoul. First, I want to show you what her cell looks like. There's a place to sleep, there's a toilet, and there's no furniture to sit on, and there's a camera watching you 24 hours a day. It's actually barely 6 square meters. Do you know what that is? It's the same size as a Mini Cooper. Her cell is damp, the air is stale. There is no sunlight, just a single bulb above her. She has no bed, and she has no mattress. Instead, she folds her blankets beneath her and pulls the remaining one to cover herself at night. But the damp seeps through. She has to wash her own clothes by hand and hang them in her cell, making the air heavier still. There's no sufficient heating. She is cold, but she sweats profusely because of her condition. And she has no extra clothes to change into. So her clothes stay wet, her hair is wet, and she's getting weaker. She falls from dizziness. So, with failing eyesight, our mother crawls around her cell on her hands and knees. Her knees are bruised. Her feet are swollen. Her arms are numb. She's in pain. These are not false accusations. These are recorded facts.
And, I mean, that's just the details about her incarceration. But keep in mind, number one, she is 82 years old. She just had heart surgery. In addition to that, she's not been convicted of a crime. She's merely charged with a crime. This is pre-trial detention. And the crime that she's charged with is so minuscule and meaningless. This is absolutely ridiculous. The crime that she's charged with is that a pastor who's no longer with her church gave a handbag that cost roughly $3,000 to the former First Lady. Now, I don't know how in the world is a $3,000 handbag that somebody else gave to somebody else worth torturing an 82-year-old woman who's just had heart surgery under these kind of conditions. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. She's not a flight risk, right? You know, she's pretty old. She doesn't have a lot of her eyesight left. You know, she's probably legally blind in you know, in the terms that we call it in the United States. You're legally blind. Maybe you have some vision, but you know, she can't read because of her eyesight. You know, and you know, yeah, a $3,000 handbag is nothing to the First Lady of a country. And she's not even the one who gave it. And they're holding this woman. I mean, to many observers, including a lot of Republicans in America, people like Newt Gingrich, people like Mike Pompeo, it looks like they're trying to kill her. It really looks like this is a political vendetta. This is entities in South Korean politics that are angry at the church for stuff that happened 40, 50 years ago. And they're now seeking to exact revenge on an 82-year-old woman who, you know, just had heart surgery, can barely see, and they're holding her in these conditions and she's not even been convicted of this alleged crime to begin with. I mean, the whole thing is outrageous, right? If it was anybody else, this wouldn't be happening, right? And she's not the only religious leader. There are a number of other religious leaders that have been held. There's another religious leader in South Korea who was detained and interrogated, and he then committed suicide right after his interrogation. And there are a number of other religious leaders that are being held in similar conditions. She's been there for a couple weeks now. This is outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous, and we have to oppose this. And I mean, as much as you might be critical of the religious movement that she and her husband were the leader of for many years, that's not the issue here, right? And that's what people always do, right? People always, you know, they make it about stuff that it's not about. Look, if you have issues with their religion, argue with them about it, right? If you feel there's other crimes that have been committed, that's on you. But there is no way that a $3,000 handbag that somebody else gave to somebody else is worth doing this to an 82-year-old woman. It's simply not ethical. This is a clear case of political retaliation, of, you know, just evil sadism on the part of the South Korean government. You know, I mean, I can't understand why anyone would do this to anybody else, right? This is just not right. I mean, it'd be one thing if she was young and in really good condition. I still feel like no one should be held under the conditions that she's being held in. But to somebody in her health condition, you know, and again, the media, whenever this case comes up, they just change the subject and they start talking about stuff from a long time ago. And that's not the point. The point is she has been key in working for peace on the Korean Peninsula. She has been. I mean, there she is, right? People in North Korea who wouldn't have had food because she and her husband, because of their unique position, were trusted enough to get exempt from the sanctions and invest in North Korea. And they got permission. Usually people in South Korea are not able to invest their money into North Korea. But because their religious group is well trusted and well connected in both the United States and in South Korea, they got permission from the American government and from the South Korean government, and they poured millions of dollars into North Korea in the 90s. And at the time, North Korea was having a food crisis. So they saved thousands of lives in North Korea. Thousands of North Koreans are alive today because of Dr. Hak Jahan Moon. And you say, Caleb, this group is anti-communist, they're this, they're that. Well, I mean, can you name me any communist group in America that has saved thousands of Korean lives, that has arranged for millions of dollars to go to North Korea during a food crisis in order to help the people there? I'm just telling you, you know, in terms of actual action, the unificationists have done more to support North Korea since 1991 than any communists in America have. Most communists in America have denounced North Korea, have cut ties with North Korea. There are only two communist groups that I know of that even have a relationship with North Korea at this time: the Socialist Workers' Party and the Workers' World Party. The Communist Party USA cut ties with North Korea when they tested nuclear weapons. Dan Margolis wrote an op-ed, said North Korea, no way to act. And the Communist Party threw North Korea under the bus to please Obama, to please the Obama administration. And there is very little solidarity and support for North Korea among the left. And, you know, the one organization here in the United States, the Nodatol Group, the Korean American organization, they claim to support North Korea. They're run by a woman named Betsy Yoon, and they don't do anything. And in fact, they've spent far more time protesting against Trump than they have supporting North Korea. I am not exaggerating here. They protested to impeach Donald Trump. They're supposed to be the North Korean Solidarity Organization. And they protested to impeach the only American president who's ever stepped foot on North Korean soil while in office. The only American president to freeze the drills. They were protesting to have him impeached. Nodatol and Betsy Yoon, they only care about LGBT rights, and they're basically just a front for the Democrat Party. They're a way to get Korean Americans who are sympathetic to communism or sympathetic to North Korea and corral them into Brian Becker's protest cage, into the Party for Socialism and Liberation. They're basically just a front for PSL that maneuvers within the Korean American community in order to help Brian Becker stage protests and in order to help the Democratic Party. And so they're not doing anything for North Korea, right? I mean, they might have a reading group about Kim Il-sung's ideas, or they might have an event with speeches in the Korean language and in English, but they don't really do anything. They support the Democrats, and the Democrats hate North Korea more than Trump does, more than the Republicans do. So, now the leader of the movement that has actually helped North Korea is being tortured to death, is being tortured in South Korea. And I hope that people will, open their eyes, just open their eyes about this situation. And, we're doing everything we can. We've been out in the streets. We've been raising that issue in the streets of New York City. We raised that. We will raise it again. And, we're trying to figure out everything that we can do. One important thing, though, is that, when it comes to solidarity activities like this, we do have to take the lead from the organization. They know what will help them and what will hurt them, right? And, so CPI, we're CPI. And, we have our way of doing things. But, when it comes to solidarity, we got to take the lead from, this organization. So, we're trying to figure out what we can do. I'm going to be somewhere this weekend, and we're trying to figure out everything we can do to raise awareness about this unjust detention, this detention for a minuscule offense of this elderly woman. I mean, it looks like they're trying to torture this woman to death. And I just want to raise awareness about that case. And I want to urge people to put aside whatever feelings they have about the Unification Church, to say, like, what they're doing to this 82-year-old woman is wrong. It's that simple. So the last item that I wanted to raise with you all, it's on a much lighter note. It's funny but sad, right? That's a meme the kids are doing now. 6 or 7, right? Or 6-7, right? That's like a meme the kids are doing these days. Well, I mean, this is one of those things where it's like, it's so sad, you just have to laugh. But I increasingly try to get you all to understand why I don't even call myself a communist anymore, and why the communist movement in America is a joke, right? And you just have to see this for yourself. I mean, you can't make this up. And all right, so you all know that Mamdani is running for mayor of New York City. He's a very good chance he'll win. And him winning, I don't really like him, but at the same time, him winning will be a statement against Israel's crimes against the Palestinians more than anything. It's basically just going to be a referendum on the fact that he's critical of Israel. So, I don't know. I mean, him winning might be good, even though he won't do good for the city. I mean, he's not going to make things better in New York City, but the attacks on him are stupid. But anyway, we all know what the allegation against Mamdani is, right? They're calling him a communist. He's being called a communist, right? That's generally what they're saying. Trump has tweeted out over and over again, Mamdani is a communist. Cuomo supporters have been calling him a communist. Curtis Sliwa supporters have been calling him a communist, because Mamdani is a member of Democratic Socialists of America. I mean, it's just constantly they're calling him a communist, right? I mean, and if you live in New York City, if you watch American mainstream media, you will know the man running for the mayorship of our city is being called a communist. Well, I came across this clip, and I don't even know what to say. This is just, it's beyond me. So The Daily Show decided they were going to interview Joe Sims, the chair of the Communist Party USA, about the fact that Mamdani is being called a communist. And I don't even know what to say. This man is the co-chair, the highest rank in the Communist Party, the chair. He shares it with somebody else. He lives in New York City, the city that Mamdani is running for mayor of.
Communist.
You're saying Mamdani's a communist?
I'm not saying that. People are saying that.
Really? How come nobody told me?
Let me show you that again. I just...
Communist.
You're saying Mamdani's a communist?
I'm not saying that. People are saying that.
Really? How come nobody told me? I'm a co-chair of the Communist Party.
Coach.
How does one become a national leader of a political party, live in New York City, and have no idea that Mamdani is being called a communist? Does he own a television? Does he read newspapers? Does he live under a rock? Is there like a rock that he lives under? Like, I'm just blown away. And do you see the way he talks there? How come nobody told me? What does he expect them to do? Knock on his office? Mr. Sims, just so you know, the Republican Party is accusing Mamdani of being a communist. Oh, thanks for letting me know. He has no idea that Mamdani, the candidate for mayor of New York City, is being called a communist. He's shocked. I don't understand this. I really don't. For a long time, I have wondered about why the leaders of communist groups in America, like why they're so incompetent and all of this. But this, I mean, I would expect the leader of any other political party to know this. Like the leader of the Libertarian Party probably knows that Mamdani is accused of being a communist. I mean, the leader of the Republican Party certainly knows it. The leader of the Democratic Party certainly knows this. But most people who live in my apartment complex in New York City know that. Average Joes on the street know this. There are people protesting when Mamdani speaks, holding hammers and sickles. Like, how in the world? But
communist.
You're saying Mamdani's a communist?
I'm not saying that. People are saying that.
Really? How come nobody told me? I'm a co-chair of the Communist Party.
How come nobody told you? I don't know what to say. a couple years ago, CPI, there were some people that were in the Communist Party that were members of CPI, and they told me they were at a meeting one time, and they were asked to name a conspiracy theory. And one of the people in the meeting raised their hand and said, Russiagate. And one of the national leaders of the Communist Party said, what's that? What's Russiagate? So this doesn't surprise me at all. It really, really doesn't. But I mean, it's like, if you can't understand what I've been trying to say on these streams, the leaders of the communist groups are picked by the FBI. Maybe that sounds a little bit extreme. Maybe that's a hard pill to swallow, but it's true, right? And I mean, I just don't know what to say, right? The leaders of communist organizations are picked by the FBI, and I will say the FBI did a really good job picking Joe Sims. No, I'm not kidding you. Some of them don't know what Russiagate is. I am not kidding you at all. That is the story I heard from the 2 Young Communist League members that were in CPI in 2022. They told me, yeah, we said Russiagate, and they said, what's that? Like, this is beyond having a bad political line. This is beyond organizational dysfunction. It's like the FBI went out of its way to find people that are completely clueless, people that are completely out to lunch, people that have no fucking clue what the hell is going on, even in their own city, and put them in charge of this party. You know, I mean, it's shocking. I will say I'm very, very, very proud that there is a hit piece on the Communist Party website against the Center for Political Innovation. There is a hit piece against us, which I will link you here. It's actually one of our greatest achievements that they decided to make a hit piece against our organization. I will pull it up. It's great. It's called Signaling Left, Turning the Right, Rebranding Populism. It's a really long article written by someone named Chris Butters. And it's all about me and how bad I am. And, and how they go over my history. I used to be in the Workers' World Party, and, oh, God forbid, I quoted Huey Long. And apparently they got their hands on this book, which called We Are City Builders, the Center for Political Innovation Educational Manual. Go read the article for yourself. Very amusing. Now, this book, keep in mind, this book, it's not that long. And it's 100 or 210 pages long. Right. A lot of it I didn't write. A lot of it is historical pieces and such. But, this is a book that, talks about the Black Panthers. Right. We got the Black Panther free breakfast program in there. Yeah, we got the free breakfast program of the Black Panthers. And yeah, we got the free breakfast program of the Black Panthers. Talks about their important work. Spends a lot of time talking about the important work of the Communist Party in fighting racism, right? We got W.E.B. Du Bois is featured at one point in the book. We got a big picture of W.E.B. Du Bois. This is a pretty decent book. It's one of the first things we published, kind of our educational manual. But yet, if you read this article, they would have you believe this is a book espousing racism. If you read this article on the Communist Party website, I challenge you, if you think the Communist Party is an honest organization, right? Here's W.E.B. Du Bois with Mao, right? This is a pretty anti-racist book, talks about the achievements of the Soviet Union in defeating fascism. This is the book. So if you still believe that the Communist Party USA is in any way honest or legitimate as an organization, buy this book or borrow it from your friend if you have one, right? And then read this article and ask yourself if this is a fair representation. They basically claim that this book about the Black Panthers, about W.E.B. Du Bois, about the heroic anti-fascism of the Soviet Union during the Second World War, they claim this book is advocating Nazism and white supremacy. I don't know where they get that from, right? It's got articles by Albert Einstein. It's got, but they claim somehow this book is Nazi. That's basically what they say if you read this hit piece they did on us. So I challenge you, right? If you think they are a legitimate organization, read this book and read what they wrote about this book and ask yourself how honest these people are. They're not honest at all. And, I don't know, just wanted to throw that out there. I don't want to get bitter on these streams, but it's just like, when people are going out of their way to defame you, and then they don't even know who Mamdani is. I mean, they don't know that Mamdani is being called a communist. I mean, what are we supposed to? I don't know, right? Yeah. So there you go. On that note, we'll do the roll call, and then I'll answer your questions. We've already got a number of questions sent in, and I appreciate it. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? We got Yusuf in Durham. Welcome, Yusuf. Good to have you with us. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Good to have you with us. John McCarthy in Chicago. Maria in Wyoming. That's cool. Bendigo, Australia, the great David Fox. Robert in New Jersey. Very good. Penny in Minnesota. Great work, Penny. Southwest Missouri. Very, very good. Toronto, Canada. Patricia Williams. David in San Jose. Liverpool, UK. John in Florida. Ryan in Kansas City. Jacob in Wisconsin. Matt in Italy. Thanks for the link. Rose, strengthening sending strength to the Korean political prisoner. Very, very good. Huey in the South. Good to see you. Names and locations. Carter's here. Hit me with a good one, Carter. You always ask great questions. Jose Gonzalez in Venezuela. Solidarity. We're with you. Kinkle and Joshua Tree. Great rally, Kinkle and Joshua Tree. You were great. It was great to see you at the rally with the hands off Venezuela sign. Good to see you. Yes, good to see you. There are 3 ways to send your questions. The best way to send questions is buy me a coffee, but you can also send questions. Rumble Rants, Caleb Oppen 22, Patrick in Maine. Good to see you as always, Patrick. Good to see you. Very, very good. All right, folks. All right. So we're going to start answering people's questions. More questions are always appreciated. All good. Just going to send a text real quick. All right. Okay. So let's look at the questions. All right. The first question was from Richard. He said, given the recent strengthening of ties between socialism with Chinese characteristics, Juche, the new Russian patriotism, Hindutva, and revolutionary Shia theology, does ideology matter anymore? More so, what does this mean for the U.S. struggle? That's a good question, right? So, I don't think all of those things that you listed there are the same. First of all, right? For example, Hindutva. I mean, India is not a socialist country in any way. India is very, very much a capitalist country with a strong domestic capitalist class. There's a strong nationalist element there, kind of like Turkey, kind of like the Philippines. India, there is government involvement in the economy. And during the 1960s, India kind of pivoted in a leftist direction, was very close to the Soviet Union. But India is certainly not a state-run economy. But, they are nationalist and traditional, right? The current president of India, Modi, is from the Hindu Nationalist Party. And sometimes he aligns with the United States. He's very pro-Israel. but other times he's critical and he's very anti-Islamic, etc. But the fact that all three of these governments are together. Look, there's a new economy that came into the world as a result of the Russian Revolution. It ideologically at this point has strayed very far from the ideology of the Russian Revolution. I think China is the only country you listed there that actually has the ideology of the Russian Revolution. I guess North Korea, Juche. China and North Korea still have Marxist-Leninist parties ruling them. They have their own spin-off interpretation, right? In China, it's socialism with Chinese characteristics, right? In China, they say that the ideology is Marxism-Leninism, and then they have Mao Zedong thought, right? Mao Zedong is not an ideology. Mao Zedong has a thought to complement the ideology. Then they have Deng Xiaoping theory. Deng Xiaoping theory. So they have a theory, they have a thought, and then they have the Marxist-Leninist ideology. Juche is the interpretation of Marxism-Leninism applied specifically to the Korean Peninsula. It is the ideology of self-reliance that was developed by Kim Il-sung. Now, all the other ideologies you listed there are not Marxist in origin, right? The new Russian patriotism is proud of the Soviet Union's achievements. And there's certainly pride in what the Soviet Union achieved, but the new Russian patriotism is very much orthodox, and it goes back a lot further than the Russian Revolution, and it often tends to think the Russian Revolution was kind of a bad moment in Russia's history. They like Stalin usually, but they don't like Lenin. Nobody really likes Lenin in Russia except communists. Communists in Russia like Lenin. Non-communists in Russia generally don't like Lenin. And that's one thing about, again, Americans got no clue what they're talking about. In America, you get a lot of people who say, well, Lenin was good, Stalin was bad. In Russia, it's reversed. You get a lot of people who say Lenin was bad, Stalin good. And how does that make any sense? Well, it makes perfect sense from their perspective, but from our American perspective, it doesn't make any sense. Under Lenin, the Soviet Union, Russia, lost a lot of territory. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk resulted in a lot of territory that was formerly part of Russia being ceded to Poland and to the Germans and other things. Under Lenin, there was a huge blockade and millions of people were starving to death and couldn't get medicine. And there was a big, ugly civil war that was going on between the White Army and the Red Army, that all kinds of massacres of civilians happened. The time when Lenin was in power was a very bad time in Russia's history. And Lenin admits that. And in fact, in the Soviet national anthem, right, the reference to Lenin, it's through days dark and stormy, while great Lenin led us, our eyes saw the bright sun of freedom for all, and Stalin, our leader, with faith in the people. So even the Soviet national anthem acknowledges the time when Lenin was in power was pretty shitty. Right? Stalin, on the other hand, Stalin industrialized the country, and Stalin then defeated the Nazis and led the country through the nightmare of World War II. And after World War II, Russia was at the height of its influence, right, in the 20th century. I mean, they haven't had any, they were at the center of the global communist movement. The final speech that Stalin gave, he says we have what he calls shock brigades all over the world. China had come over to their side and was aligned with them. North Korea, all of Eastern Europe, communism was rising all over the world. So, and the Soviet Union was the center of this movement that had stretched. It was the majority of the planet at that point. Russia, China, to admire Stalin from a Russian nationalist perspective, Stalin did a lot for Russia. Lenin, on the other hand, unless you are a communist yourself and you understand that, that what Stalin did was not possible without Lenin, right? And if you don't understand that what Stalin did was on the foundation of Lenin, right? It's going to be hard to see that Lenin was good. Now, Hindutva does not oppose capitalism. Hindutva is just a traditionalist ideology. From India, that says the Indian people have their Hinduism, their spiritual beliefs, and that they should use that as the basis for government. Right? The Shia revolutionary theology is not Marxist. It rejects capitalism, but it also rejects Marxism as a secular ideology. And it believes that the correct interpretation of Islam is to have a state that mobilizes the oppressed and to have leaders that sacrifice themselves for the oppressed. They don't believe in the lending of money. And overall, I mean, Iran has a state-run economy. They call it not capitalism, but Islam. The resistance economy is what the Supreme Leader. And I actually have like the book the Supreme Leader wrote where he condemns capitalism. He condemns private property. I mean, he says that, you know, exploitation and private property is a violation of Islamic teachings, but they are not Marxists, right? And they are the first to tell you that. And they actually, furthermore, Khomeini, not only is he not a Marxist, but he opposed any attempt to combine Islam and Marxism. He said, you can't do that, right? He said, Marxism and Islam are incompatible. So, you know, there were a lot of people at the time of the Islamic Revolution that called themselves Islamo-Marxists, and he rejected that as well. They are Muslims, not Marxists, and they're very clear about that. All of those things are based on the fact that a new economy emerged because of the Russian Revolution. And that this is where this gets tricky. This all gets very, very tricky because Bolshevism, as I've spelled out many times on these streams, was a weird spin-off interpretation of communism. Bolshevism said that the problem isn't capitalism, it's imperialism, it's monopolistic capitalism, and that we can align with capitalists in the colonized world to fight against imperialism. That's a big part of Leninism. Lenin, after the Russian Revolution, they sponsored the Congress of the Peoples of the East in Baku, Azerbaijan, and they gave military support to the conservative monarchist emir of Afghanistan. They gave military support to the Egyptian merchants who launched an uprising against the British. You know, I mean, they said the focus is on fighting imperialism, and they developed an organizational style that was very non-Western called democratic centralism. And, you know, the Soviet ideology was not the Second International. Marxism was the Second International. It was Karl Kautsky. It was the German Social Democratic Party, the British Labour Party. That was Marxism. Bolshevism, that eventually became known to the world as Marxism-Leninism, was a spin-off that was considered deviant. It was considered to be a weird cult interpretation of Marxism, but it took power in the Soviet Union, and they created the Third International, and they had beliefs that were very different on a number of issues. And they took power. One thing that is worth pointing out, and this was my biggest, I guess I'll just, since we're talking about what does ideology matter? So the reason that I mean, my big disagreement with the Workers' World Party revolved around this book. I read this book when Libya was being bombed by the United States, and it's a brilliant book. It's called The Green Book by Muammar Gaddafi. And if you read it, Muammar Gaddafi rejects Marxism, but he has his own ideology of Islamic socialism, and he lays it out brilliantly here. And you read this book, I mean, if Libya follows this book, which they did, Libya is a socialist country by the Marxist definition. Profits are not in command. There's been an anti-colonial revolution. There's a centrally planned economy. But the line of the Marxists has always been Libya is not socialist. It's a bourgeois nationalist regime because they don't espouse Marxism-Leninism. And for me, I found that to be a particularly absurd pill to swallow, especially because the position of the political party that I was in the Workers' World Party, and their position, they came out of Trotskyism, but their position was that a government can have a bad political line, but socialism is about the economic foundations. That was their position. And they quoted from who was it? From Trotsky, from In Defense of Marxism, where Trotsky said, look, the Soviet Union, maybe it's led by a parasitical Stalinist bureaucracy, but the property is still nationalized. The means of production function according to a central plan. So it's still a workers' state moving towards socialism. It's just, you know, got a bad political line. So then I said, well, if the Soviet Union, if you're saying that you don't agree with Stalin, but it was still socialist because of the economic foundations, if Libya has these economic foundations, why is it not socialist? Right? I mean, if having a bad political line changes the economic character, that's one thing. But your position is that that's not the case, because Trotskyists, Maoists, and others frequently said things like, well, the Soviet Union outlawed abortion, so it couldn't be socialist. Well, how does that matter? That doesn't affect the economic foundations, right? They would say things like, well, the Soviet Union had this policy we don't like, so it's not socialist. And the response was always, no, socialism is about the economic foundations. Well, if socialism is about the economic foundations, why does that not apply to people who don't espouse Marxism-Leninism, right? And if socialism is about economic foundations, what's the issue there? There was no economic difference between Libya and Cuba, Libya and China, etc. And in fact, Libya was more socialistic, more of a state-run economy than China was, at the time that it was overthrown. So, all of this gets to be absurd. I think basically the position that I have come to, and I hope this is a roundabout way of answering your question, Richard, is that if you read what Lenin wrote in Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, basically what he's saying is that capitalism in our time has become imperialism, that the socialist movement has deteriorated into a movement of Western leaders that want to make imperialism more effective, and they want to redistribute the wealth of imperialism with welfare programs. And he says that's not socialism. He says socialism will come into the world as the struggle against imperialism, and it'll be oppressed nations, and it'll be nationalist movements fighting against imperialism that'll bring socialism into the world. That's what Lenin says. Go and read Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. That's the point he makes, that we live in the age of the imperialist monopolies. The peoples of the East are being colonized and exploited by this Western system. The socialist movement has largely just become a mechanism for making that system more stable. So we need a new movement. We need to go lower and deeper to the real masses. We need to build a new movement that's about fighting imperialism. And that movement is how socialism will emerge. It'll be the colonized peoples of the world, led by the working class, which will be their majority and has the most to gain. That's how socialism is going to come into the world. Well, I would argue that Lenin was right about that, and he was more right than he realized. And that basically, in order to really fight imperialism, you have to have socialism. And it's not just a matter of the only way to really have socialism is to fight imperialism. It's that if you really want to push out the imperialists, you have to have socialism. You can try. There are forces around the world that don't have planned economies, that don't have state-run economies, that try to resist the imperialists. But ultimately, if you're at odds with imperialism, you're building an economy that's at odds with imperialism, you have to abolish profits and command. For example, Iran. It's pretty clear that Khomeini did not want to build a socialist economy when Iran had its revolution. He said, we're going to have the third way. We're going to have not capitalism, but Islam. However, over the course of the Iraq-Iran war, throughout the 80s, they built a state-run economy. They had the construction jihad. They built the hospitals. They mobilized. They built the besieged councils. And Iran was basically backed into having a socialist revolution. It looks like Gaddafi was a similar case. Gaddafi, when he first came to power, he wanted to have some kind of social, military nationalist government. But in the process of doing it, they had to create the revolutionary councils, and as a result, Libya became, and this wasn't published until the mid-70s. Ultimately, they developed this and they built a socialist economy. And that there are a number of forces around the world that try to fight the imperialists, and they either lose, or over the course of fighting the imperialists, they develop a planned economy. And so if Hinduvada, as you're talking about, if that really comes into a full confrontation with the imperialists, right? If that comes into full confrontation with the imperialists, they're going to have to centrally plan their economy, or else the imperialists will be able to destroy it, right? They're going to have to, so if Hinduvada were to really fight imperialism, which right now they're kind of, they go back and forth, but if they were to really fight imperialism, they'd have to change property relations. And that's not the case. India is a very capitalist country right now, and they don't really want to fight the imperialists. Modi would love to get along with the imperialists, and he would love to fight China with Trump. I mean, but at the same time, the imperialists don't want them to exist. They don't want any competition. And India has a strong national economy. And the same goes for Erdogan, right? Erdogan would love to collaborate with the imperialists, and he has in Libya and other places, but they also don't want him to exist. Imperialism is about monopoly. That is, the big Western corporations want an absolute monopoly. They don't want competitors. They want the countries around the world to be impoverished, captive markets that they can dump their products on, they can use to make super profits, to export their capital. And if you're going to completely break out of that and just build up your economy and exist in defiance of imperialism, you have to have socialism. And as a result of Russia and China existing, and as a result of the anti-imperialist world existing, you have a layer of countries that have emerged where there is enough of a domestic capitalist class that they can go both ways, right? Brazil is a great example, right? Brazil, Lula da Silva, when he was in power, he was not Hugo Chavez. He was not Maduro, right? And he tried to do both ways, and they railroaded him to jail. They ousted his successor, Dilma Rousseff. They had Bolsonaro. Now Lula is back. But, the reason that they were ousted and the reason Brazil, is still not really free from imperialist domination, even though they have a very large capitalist class, is because they never, Lula da Silva never actually moved towards centralizing their economy. Right. And that the only way to really not be under imperialist domination, to really fully break with imperialist domination, is to have a planned economy. And so if a country is really determined to go head on against the imperialists, they need to do that. Now, Che Guevara wrote about this. Che Guevara said his analysis, he said the national bourgeoisie is too weak to resist imperialism. It needs the working class. That was Che Guevara's position. And that's very similar to what Mao Zedong wrote in his essay On New Democracy, right? Go and read On New Democracy by Mao Zedong. He makes a very similar argument. And in China, right? In China, the revolution was not a socialist revolution. They did not fight for socialism in China. They fought a new democratic revolution. They said, basically, we just want a strong economy. We want to build a new China, and we want to have capitalism in China. The Communist Party of China took power saying we don't want to build socialism. We want to have capitalism. However, the only way we can have capitalism is we need a workers and peasants government, that will, kick out the imperialists and enable us to have capitalism. And it wasn't until the 60s that China said that we're moving towards socialism. But the Chinese flag, this is the flag of China. And what is that flag? Now, that flag, there are 5 stars on it. The big star represents the Communist Party. And the 4 other stars represent the block of 4 classes. And the first class is the peasantry. And they were the overwhelming majority of the Chinese revolutionary movement, right? The Red Army, the Communist Party was overwhelmingly peasants. They were the overwhelming majority. Then you had the workers, the factory workers. Then you had the urban merchants, small business owners. And then you had the national bourgeoisie. And the national bourgeoisie referred to millionaires, right? And if you read what Salman Adler wrote, I have his book here somewhere. Salman Adler wrote a book about China in the 1950s. And he talked about how there were many millionaires in China in the 1950s. Right? China, they did not call it a socialist economy in the 1950s. It was a new democratic economy. But the only way that they could have a new democratic economy was to have the Communist Party take power. And in order to facilitate their new democratic economy, they had to have the Soviet Union come into the country and build power plants and provide medical care and build storm levees so people didn't die in floods every year. And that in order to facilitate having a capitalist economy that was not under the control of the West, they had to have a very powerful state to protect it. And eventually that powerful state started managing the entire economy and building up state-run industries. And so it's like there's many examples of this. You can't really come into a full-blown confrontation with the imperialists and survive and not restructure your economy to not have profits in command. You have to have a centrally planned economy. You have to have elements of 5-year planning and central planning in order to consistently and resist imperialism in the long term, right? You can't have an anti-imperialist state for more than a year or two without a planned economy, or else it'll just be defeated, right? If you're going to maintain power in an anti-imperialist state, you ultimately have to centralize the means of production. Iran and Libya are great examples of that. And there are other examples of that. But if you look at an anti-imperialist country that is consistently anti-imperialist, right, you have to have a centrally planned economy, or else Wall Street will just, crush you. And I think this is the ultimate fulfillment. But then that also goes to show why you don't have to be communist anymore, right? Because communism, and that's the thing, China does not have a Soviet-style economy, and they shouldn't, right? And Russia doesn't have a Soviet-style economy. In the 90s, they had capitalism, free market capitalism, and now they've put the centers of economic power, the major energy companies and banking and all that, in the hands of the state. But, it's largely a capitalist economy, with lots of private businesses, lots of markets, a lot of wealthy people, all of that. But the state controls and plans out production. It's, again, my understanding of the difference between capitalism and socialism is that in capitalism, profits are in command. And that in capitalism, profits are in command. And in socialism, society as a whole controls the means of production. If you have an anti-colonial revolution that results in the creation of a planned economy, where the state that comes out of an anti-colonial revolution controls the economy in order to create growth, that's what socialism is. And that socialism is not, number one, it's not state ownership, because, Britain nationalized almost everything after World War II. But that was to facilitate British imperialism. And that was to facilitate British mega corporations making super profits all over the world. If the state managed the British economy and ran the steel industry and the mines and the railways after World War II, that doesn't mean Britain is a socialist country, because big corporations that are making profits all over the world are still in control, right? State ownership is not synonymous with socialism. Saudi Arabia has almost an entirely state-run economy. But it's a monarchy, and the state-run economy generates profits for the ruling family, the Saudi royal family, and basically the Saudi royal family. Based on how close you are to the king, you're like a shareholder in the corporation, basically. And most of the population are guest worker slaves that have no rights, and it's still a profit-centered economy. It's just the state is like that. And Singapore is another similar case where, again, the state is heavily involved in running the economy, but profits are still in command. What defines capitalism is preliminary transformation into capital. As Frederick Engels said, under capitalism, the means of production only function as preliminary transformation into capital. And if you have an anti-colonial revolution and the government doesn't function and the economy doesn't function on the basis of preliminary transformation into capital, that's not capitalism. And if the government's heavily involved in the economy, but it's still functioning on the basis of profit, it's still capitalism, right? That's the difference. People, and this is why I don't even, what I'm saying here is so contrary to what the majority of communists in America believe. Most communists in America, the overwhelming majority, think that communism is a worker cooperative enterprise. They will tell you the Soviet Union had nothing to do with communism. China had nothing to do with communism. No. Communism is when you and your friends open a pencil factory and share the profits. Well, they're wrong. And libertarians will be the first people to tell you you can do that in capitalism. There's nothing stopping you. If you and your buddy want to start a company and share the profits together, that's capital. That's called capitalism, right? It's a shareholder corporation, except everyone's got an equal share. That's capitalism. And your corporation is functioning to make a profit, and there's not an overall planned economy. That's capitalism, right? And and libertarians say, if that's what socialism is, that's also called capitalism. But that's what the majority of people think. They listen to Richard Wolff, and they think that socialism is an employee stock ownership program. So then there's a layer of people who think socialism is when the government does stuff, right? And that's a really common one. That's what they teach you in American school, that America's half socialist and half capitalist. We have the post office, but we also have McDonald's. Well, no, the government does stuff in every capitalist country. In fact, the U.S. Constitution says that the post office must be maintained not as a private corporation, that roads must be paved. I mean, that having a state to facilitate the market, that's something Adam Smith believed in. It wasn't really until Ayn Rand and people like that that anyone questioned the notion that you have commons, right? You have paved roads, you have a postal service, you have a power plant, you have a local dog catcher to catch the stray dogs. It was always understood that you have some level of state facilitation of the market, right? Collective capitalist ownership. That was always understood, and that's not what socialism is, right? And in fact, having state involvement in the economy is very necessary. And you get people that say, well, socialism is when the government works for the people. Well, how do you measure that? How do you measure that? This is when the government works for the people. I mean, what does that mean, right? That's purely in the eye of the beholder. Socialism is when profits are no longer in command. It is the negation of profits in command. And in our time, that means coming into confrontation with the imperialist monopolies. That's what socialism is. And that is my understanding of it from reading Lenin, from reading Marx, from, and all that. And nobody agrees with me about this. You go to China, they agree with me about this. You go to Vietnam, they agree with me about this. You go to former Soviet Union, they agree with me about this. But, the overwhelming majority of people in America who call themselves communists, this is contrary to what they believe. And so that makes me wonder, like, why am I, it just confuses people. If I call myself a communist, it just confuses people. They don't understand it, because there is a lot of people running around now in America calling themselves communists who believe something contrary to what I believe, totally contrary. And I wrote a whole book about, To the Marxists, Long Live Innovationism. And I've broken with the dialectical materialist philosophy. And, we're way past all of this. So, but this is the important thing. And so what you're getting at, Richard, is that, yes, ultimately people will break with imperialism on the basis of many different ideologies. And that, this is another point that I made. When capitalism emerged from feudalism, it did not have the same ideology everywhere. And this, this is a big hole in it, right? So, when the French Revolution happened, France had been a Catholic country, and they had the cult of reason, the cult of the supreme being. They abolished religion, right? They converted the Notre Dame Cathedral to a temple of reason. They suppressed the church. They were atheistic. And then after that, when Napoleon came in, they brought the Catholic Church back. And they had, a monarchy with Napoleon as the emperor. What was their ideology? It was the ideology of the French Revolution. It was atheism, Catholicism, monarchy. That was the ideology through which France had its capitalism emerge. In Britain, how did capitalism emerge? It emerged on the basis of Protestant fanaticism, right? The Church of England was the church that was propping up feudalism. And it was the Roundheads and the Puritans that built the New Model Army and fought for the Parliament against the king, cut off King Charles I's head, and brought capitalist property relations into dominance within the English state. And they did it on the basis of radical Protestant fanaticism. And then after about, a few decades of that, Oliver Cromwell died, and then they brought back the Church of England. It was a completely different ideology than the French Revolution, but the property relations were the same. They created private property. They broke apart the feudal commons, and they created private property. So if capitalism can come into the world on the basis of different ideology, who's to say that communism won't, or that socialism won't, right? I mean, why? I mean, and, all the monarchies and all the feudalism that existed, everywhere feudalism existed, practically it had a different belief system, right? You had, in Tibet, you had Buddhist feudalism. In the Islamic world, you had Islamic feudalism, right? In Europe, you had Christian feudalism. If you look at the Aztecs in Mexico, that was the Roman Empire in Mexico, right? I mean, the Roman Empire, it was a slave system, and they controlled the trade routes, and they captured people and forced them to give slaves and tribute to a mighty city. What the Aztecs had in Mexico was Rome. It was the Roman system, but it was in Mexico, not in Italy. It was the same economic system, but did they worship the same gods? No, they had different religious traditions, they had different beliefs, but it was the same economic system, right? That the Marxist materialist view is that beings are constantly moving toward a higher mode of production. And that these modes of production create more or less the same system, but in the name of a different ideology, right? And that feudalism everywhere is pretty much the same. You have serfs and landowners, right? In Tibetan Buddhism, you had serfs and you had landowners. In, Christian Buddhism or Christian feudalism, you had serfs and landowners. In the Aztec system, you had slaves. You had one mighty city that all the slaves were taken to. You had a city state that was extracting tribute. It's that these forms, these economic forms, match a certain level of technological development that mankind is at. But they have different ideologies. But anyway, that was a long answer to your question, Richard, but it's something I've spent a long time thinking about. And it's something that, again, right? You think Joe Sims is talking like this? Do you think Joe Sims, the leader of the Communist Party, you think this guy is capable of talking about any of these issues?
You're saying Mondami's a communist?
I'm not saying that. People are saying that.
Really? How come nobody told me?
Yeah, you think he's capable of answering any of these questions? I'm just throwing this out there, right? We're getting into really heavy stuff here, trying to understand how the world works, but anyway, next question. How were Russia and China viewed in the 2000s? It's weird because the USA brought Russia into the ISS in the 90s and 2000s, but it to this day refused to let China on the ISS. Putin and Bush Sr. did seem close. Yeah, well, when Putin first came into office, it was a very gradual process of restructuring the economy around the state. And there was a lot of compromise, a lot. And it really wasn't until about 2008 that they were full on demonizing Russian President Putin. I mean, there was starting to be some of it. 2007, 2008. I remember they ran the year that Obama was running for president. That winter, I stayed in my college dorm. I didn't go home for the holidays. And there was a TV in my college dorm, and I watched it a lot because I was alone in the college dorm. And they were running a documentary on CNN that was like on loop, right? They ran it like 3 times a day, and it was called Tsar Putin. And they were talking about how Putin has summer camps where young people learn that Stalin was good and Putin is a dictator. And I remember seeing that and thinking, oh, I thought Bush, was the president, said he looked into the goodness of his heart and he was a good man or whatever. And it was that the position on Putin had finally, they were suspicious of him, but they finally were really hating him. And then that summer, the summer of 2008, Georgia, the U.S. aligned government of Georgia, attacked South Ossetia. And so then Russia protected South Ossetia, and there was the war. And that was full on demonizing Russia. And they never mentioned that Georgia started it. They always made it sound like Russia, again, kind of like Ukraine, that, Russia just out of the blue decided to attack Georgia because they're big, mean, and scary. Well, no, what happened is Georgia bombed South Ossetia first, and then Russia retaliated in response because they're obligated to protect the people of South Ossetia. And they never mentioned that on American TV. And I remember I was in college at the time, fall semester starts up. People are like, wow, Russia's being so aggressive. I'm like, actually, Georgia was aggressive. They attacked South Ossetia. Nuh-uh, I didn't hear that on TV. That can't be true. And I'd say, look it up. And people would look it up. Oh, wow. Russia didn't attack first. It was actually the Georgians who attacked. People would be shocked, and that's my whole experience, right? And I'm thinking like, people walk around thinking they know what's true because they watch CNN. The US media just never mentioned why that started. But yeah, that was when Georgia attacked South Ossetia, right? After John McCain went there, John McCain was very close to Georgia and all that. After Georgia attacked South Ossetia, then it was full on hate Russia. But yeah, they were not sure, right? They were not fully sure. And China, right? China, the hate China stuff, right? There's always been a layer of people in America that don't like China because of the communism thing, right? And they always would talk about Tiananmen, right? 1989. They would always talk about, different things. But I remember when the Olympics were held in China, right? And when the Olympics were held in China and they did they really played up Free Tibet, and they really played up, Save Darfur. And it was the liberals that were more anti-China. I remember watching the debates in the 2008 election, and it seemed like the main difference between the Republicans and the Democrats was that the Democrats were focused on hating China, and the Republicans were focused on hating Muslims and supporting Israel. Right? That was actually the difference. Bush had invaded Iraq. Democrats thought invading Iraq was stupid. And Democrats were in Hollywood with George Clooney saying, we got to save Darfur, we got to free Tibet, China is doing all this technology, and China is this big, scary, evil thing. And Republicans were saying, Muslims, 9/11, terrorists, got to support, Israel. That was where, Republicans were. And it's funny because now it's kind of flipped, right? So now Republicans are focused on hating China. Democrats are focused on hating Russia, but they're also focused on, whatever the latest regime change humanitarian cause is. So it's kind of interesting to think about. But yeah, hate for China was kind of a Hollywood fetish. Hollywood liberals and stuff in the 90s were into that. And in the 2000s too. I do remember, I will never forget, the first time I ever visited New York City was for a big anti-war rally that happened in 2007. Me and my high school buddy, we walked down Broadway, and at that rally that was huge because Bush was still in office, so opposing the Iraq War was a Democrat cause back then. There were hundreds of thousands of people, and MoveOn.org, the organization of George Soros, the Democrat activist group, was there, and they were handing out thousands of signs to people. And then people just took them. They didn't know what to believe. And the sign said, out of Iraq into Darfur. And they were saying that the USA should pull the troops out of Iraq and then invade Sudan and occupy the Darfur region of Sudan. Instead of occupying Iraq, fight this country in Africa that's aligned with China, Sudan. And on the same day, George Clooney had a rally to save Darfur. And it was like the Democrats were very much trying to make the Iraq war movement into a war with China movement. And an invade Sudan movement. I remember that. That was part of that. But again, it was kind of like hoity-toity liberals that knew about China. Conservatives didn't know about China back then. Conservatives were mad about 9/11. They thought all Muslims were terrorists. They thought, they were Muslims. They were terrorists. They wanted to fight them and all of that. Whereas it was hoity-toity liberals who thought they knew about world politics, and were into Buddhism or whatever. They were the ones that hated China. But that changed. It started to change when they were calling Obama a communist and then China was communist. One thing that was odd that I remember is also when Obama was running for president, the Tea Party got going right after he ran for president. Right after Obama took office, you had the Tea Party that was against the Affordable Care Act. And it was all these like protests among conservatives that were against Obama, calling him a communist. And at those Tea Party protests, they called Russia communist. And that was the thing, because we had always been told, the narrative about Russia that I got when I was a kid is Russia was a shithole when it was communist. And the 90s, they got free and they have the free market and they're just so happy. And then and the only image you ever saw of Russia was fireworks going off and corks popping, and they're celebrating their freedom from communism. And that was all we knew about Russia. Well, and it's funny because it was the opposite. During the time of the Soviet Union, their economy was much stronger than it was in the 90s. The 90s was a nightmare for Russia economically. You can read The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein. It was a nightmare. And then Putin started fixing the economy by restructuring it around state-run oil and gas. But that's not what we were told. We're told Russia's doing better now because they have freedom. And the only memo we ever got on Russia was Russia has freedom now, so they're doing better. And so then all of a sudden, gradually Putin is being more and more demonized. And then during the Tea Party, these, Republican, like Tea Party activists were getting up and confronting Obama, and they were saying consistently, we don't want America to be like Russia, a communist country. We don't want America to be, and suddenly among conservatives, Russia was communist again. That was very weird. It was very, very weird. And it wasn't ever really explained. It was like Russia was communist again because Putin likes Stalin. Russia was communist again because it attacked Georgia and that's anti-American or something. They never really explained why Russia was considered communist again. But it was first Republicans, it was Republicans that were saying Russia was communist again. And yeah, it's weird how things evolve. And it's a good question, Richard, because the narratives evolve, right? And now Republicans are the ones focused on opposing China. It's all very interesting. All right. So then Huey Kingfish Long says, greetings, Caleb. It's worth noting that there has been a fight in the Trump administration regarding Venezuela. We have Rubio versus Rick Grinnell. I had a feeling that was the case, and let's hope that clearer heads prevail. And he sent me this Politico article about how there is a wing of the Trump administration that doesn't want to strike Venezuela. Well, thank God. And let's hope that they prevail because, it's absolutely crazy. My analysis of what could happen in Venezuela has always been, since this crisis started, there's basically three possible outcomes of this crisis. Outcome number one is that we'll get the same thing that happened in Trump's first term, which is that after a bunch of saber rattling and a bunch of provocations, they'll back off. I hope that's what happens. Second thing, which is very likely at this point, I'm not saying it's going to happen, I really hope it doesn't, is there will be airstrikes on Venezuela in the name of opposing drugs. The third option, right, and this is John Edwards here in the chat, is saying, this could happen, is the USA could actually invade Venezuela. That would be an absolute disaster because Colombia will send troops to defend Venezuela. Russia and China already have sent military hardware. There's Wagner Group, Russian, private contractors there. That'll be a bloodbath. Lots of Americans will come home in body bags. And also it'll spill. There'll be chaos all over South America. If you think we got a problem with migrants now, you think we got a problem with drug gangs now, you don't want that third option. That third option is an absolute disaster for our entire hemisphere. And if Trump is stupid enough to follow Marco Rubio into a new Vietnam, into chaos in Venezuela, I really, really will not be impressed. That would be absolutely the worst thing, and especially for all the issues he's concerned about, right? He says he doesn't like migrants and refugees. Well, do you think they're coming from stable countries? Right? He says he doesn't like drug gangs. Well, who do you think is going to take over if you overthrow the government of a country and you cast a country into chaos? Who steps up to lead? Everything that Trump supporters don't like will get worse if the USA invades Venezuela. They shouldn't bomb Venezuela. They shouldn't invade Venezuela. They should leave Venezuela alone. I'm very glad that we intervened at the No Kings rallies to say that. I'm very glad we did that. I'm proud of our activism at the No Kings rallies. Here, for those of you who may not have seen it, I'll put our what we did. We did great work this weekend. We crashed the Democrats party. Penny was amazing. But everybody was amazing. LA was amazing. Chicago was amazing. Iowa and Joshua Tree and everyone did a great job. Here we go. As you know, probably, on Saturday, there was a huge mobilization by the Democrat Party against Donald Trump. It was called No Kings. And many people are commenting on the rallies, how it was largely middle-aged and elderly people, and how the rallies seemed to have no real substance other than Trump derangement syndrome. Well, we at the Center for Political Innovation, we decided to crash these rallies to say, hands off Venezuela. If you want to protest Trump, you should be protesting the fact that he's threatening a new war right here in our hemisphere against Venezuela. And we reject largely the Trump derangement syndrome message, but we called for hands off Venezuela. Now, we went to a number of these rallies around the country, and made our point, hands off Venezuela, interrupted elected officials, passed out leaflets, had some great conversations. Here is a summary of our intervention at the No Kings rallies, October 18th.
Venezuela. Keep my money here for jobs and education in America.
Instead of no kings, we should be having a rally, no wars. Maybe the one in the Middle East ended, maybe it didn't. Hopefully the one in Ukraine is about to end, but we need not to start one in Venezuela. No new Vietnam in this hemisphere. Stop the war against Maduro. Venezuela isn't pushing drugs, the CIA is. Stop Mark Rubio and the neocons from conning Trump into a new war in Venezuela.
Hands off Venezuela. I don't want our children to go to war. I don't want anybody's child to go to war. We can't afford any more war. We need hands off Venezuela. Hands off Venezuela. No war. And we gotta apply pressure where it's needed, like the neocons.
Minnesota and Twin Cities. Come on, buddy.
Hands off Venezuela! Hands off Venezuela! Did you give yourselves a hand? This is glorious! Hands off Venezuela! No kings! You say no Trump! No kings! No kings! No kings!
We say in Latin America, solo el pueblo salva al pueblo. Only the people can save the people.
We are the people that will repair, restore, and make this nation finally the place of belonging for all of us. Hands off Maduro! Hands off Venezuela! Hands off Maduro! Hands off Venezuela! Hands off Maduro! As an indigenous Mexican, jobs and schools for us. As a mother, my heart is heavy. America.
As we witness the pain and the violence brought upon our families,
bring our troops home.
kidnapping of immigrants and citizens alike,
indigenous people, bring
violent arrests,
no war in Venezuela.
militarized missions in the name of full safety.
Well, it's disrespectful to invade another country.
When hearts are numb, the cries of
We don't want no World War III. We don't want World War III, folks. This is what we ought to be talking about. The kings are the military-industrial complex, the pharmaceutical-industrial complex, the Democrats, the Republicans, even Mamdani. He wants the young people to think Maduro is a dictator. He is not. So it's not just Marco Rubio. It's Mamdani and the Democrats too. Because at the end of the day, they make money from the lobbyist groups. We need to get money out of politics. That's what we need to do, folks. We don't need to be creating another war with Venezuela. Venezuela never attacked us. We're bombing fishing boats. Hands off Venezuela. Peace now.
We got a oligarch crisis.
So stop
And this is why we are in a situation
You're
where
worried
we're
about
fighting for our
guns?
very
Bring our
democracy at
troops
this
home and
moment.
stop bombing
Because
our country.
these people are not
No, stop the war in Venezuela.
They want to
Jobs
say
and
Martin
schools
Luther
for
King,
America.
democratic
You want to
society
stop
too,
school
and we
shootings?
say absolutely
Let's stop selling
no,
guns to
no
Nazis
kids.
in Ukraine, huh? How about that?
And what about the abuse of the criminal justice system? My dear friend and your dear friend, Tish James, is facing an indictment along with James Comey. This is an abuse of the criminal justice system. Basically, he took your Medicare and Medicaid and got rid of it so that he could give it the money to the billionaires. It is so evil, so wrong, and we can't stand it.
Hands off Maduro! Bring our troops home!
From President Trump into war with Venezuela. That war will make Vietnam look like a picnic. Everybody in Venezuela's got a gun and they all love their president. This war will be a dumb war to get into. Any war is dumb, but this war will be really dumb. Stop Rubio's war in Venezuela. Got to concentrate on ending wars, not making wars. If the Democratic Party adopts that message, they'll win 100% of the House. But instead, they're talking about stupid stuff.
Brother, I like your sign a lot. Could I ask you about it?
Yeah, sure.
All right. You are live on No Jumper, brother. What is Hands Off Venezuela? What's going on for those that don't know?
So for those who don't know, right now the U.S. is trying to destabilize Venezuela again, to trying to take its resources by claiming that the government is in cahoots with narco traffickers. While we all know that the CIA, like there's a 60-minute segment that shows that a general that was smuggling was actually a CIA asset.
Wow.
So it's like
kind of like mirroring what happened with the Iran-Contra.
Yeah,
it sounds like El Salvador in the 80s.
Yeah, definitely. But this was in the 90s when Venezuela is still not in a socialist government.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why do I keep hearing about Israel's involvement?
The Venezuelan government has been very outspoken about the genocide that's currently going on in Gaza. So if you have a legit government calling you out by name and word, by calling it a genocide, saying that you're committing genocide out loud, I don't think you're gonna like as Israel hearing that, like when having that.
They don't want to get put on blast.
Yeah, they don't want to get put on blast. You could insinuate it and it'll be fine with it, but like they don't want to be called out for what it is, because like there's meaning, like legally there's meaning to those words, like so there's retribution, but.
Well, at the end of the day, it's money in politics. I mean, it doesn't matter where that money is coming from necessarily. I mean, there's lobbyist groups of all kinds. And, when Obama was president, the Supreme Court passed Citizens United, which put that on steroids.
Right.
Basically, it had already been in place, but now anything goes. And we're seeing the influence of AIPAC in practically every part of our government. You know what I mean? So it's like, and even Trump, I think at the Knesset even admitted, to the world that, we're getting all this money from, Mary Mendelsohn and all this. And, the irony of this event here is George Soros funds a lot of the No Kings events. And he's technically, by principle, you could say he's a king.
Yeah,
a lot of money,
like, is that the richest dude in the world, kind of?
Hi, this is Paul and Gavin from the Quad Cities branch of the Center for Political Innovation. We're here at the No Kings rally in Davenport, Iowa. And, I figured this was going to be a few hundred people at the most. It actually looks like thousands of people. And so I was able to get out 100 of the Stop Trump and Rubio's War on Venezuela, I guess specifically Rubio's War on Venezuela, flyers out. Those things went like hotcakes.
He has lost the plot with this circus rally. Instead of campaigning to stop Comey and John Bolton from going to jail, they should be campaigning to throw Mark Rubio in there with them. Regime change wars are a crime. All war is a crime. Peace is the future. The summit coming up in Bucharest is the future, but a new war with Venezuela will sabotage it, and that's what Mark Rubio is pushing. Mark Rubio is the new John Bolton, and Mark Rubio needs to join John Bolton in prison. Don't defend Bolton, don't defend Comey, don't defend Clapper, don't defend Hillary, don't defend these warmongers. Oppose all wars. If you want the Democrats back in power, you have to oppose the wars. That's what people voted for, is an end to the wars. That's not what this administration actually delivered. If you show you're going to deliver it, then you'll win. But if you show that you oppose him even talking about ending the wars, then you're going to lose again. People are tired of wars. People around the world are tired of the wars. People in the United States are tired of the wars. And we don't need a new Vietnam here in our hemisphere. We need to stop this war with Venezuela. We need to fire Mark Rubio and have him be John Bolton's cellmate.
Yep. That's us. All right. Next question. African fan says, if all international trade were ceased and China seems to be the best place to be autosufficient at good living standard, tech, agriculture, and industry, what could be the long-term goal for their form of state as a communist-led society? Well, one thing that I really appreciate about Deng Xiaoping theory is that it got back to what is a really important aspect of Marx's teachings that got lost in the 20th century. And it's one thing I'm quite critical of Stalin and others for, is that they got away from this understanding that the basis of the higher stage of communism is vast material abundance. Communism is a struggle to create abundance, right? Now that is something that, again, we're told communists want everyone to be poor and equal, and this is completely obscured, but this is from Critique of the Goethe Program. In the higher phase of communist society, after the enslaving subordination of the individual to the division of labor, and therewith the antithesis between mental and physical labor has vanished, after labor has become not only a means of life, but life's prime want, after the productive forces have also increased with the all-around development of the individual, and all the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly, only then can the narrow horizon of bourgeois right be crossed in its entirety, and society inscribe on its banners, from each according to his own ability, to each according to his needs. The goal is to have society take control of the economy and rescue the economy from the irrationality of the market, the irrationality of profits in command, and thus enable wealth and abundance to be unleashed, and that will then create the basis of equality. Forced equality is not consistent with Marxism. Unfortunately, during the Cold War, that became what a lot of communist governments tried to do, right? Che Guevara with his New Socialist Man, China with the Cultural Revolution, Pol Pot with his Year Zero campaign, and even Stalin in the final years of his life, he said the Soviet Union was entering the early stages of communism. No. The only way you can build an egalitarian society is with abundance. The basis of inequality and the basis of social hierarchy and the state is scarcity. Abundance is the road to freedom. And in We Are City Builders, in this book, I quote Deng Xiaoping about this excessively. Deng Xiaoping wrote on this very question. And so if you have our textbook, We Are City Builders, I would encourage you to get the first CPI textbook. We've advanced as an organization from there, but this is still the foundations. And I will read you what Deng Xiaoping said. Right? Deng Xiaoping says, what does Deng Xiaoping say? Hold on. Let me find the quotations from Deng Xiaoping. He says, quote, "The fact that China is poor, has weak economic foundations, and is backward in education, science, and culture means that we have to go through hard struggle. We want to make use of foreign funds and technology to actively expand our foreign trade, but we must primarily rely on our own efforts. We are opposed to those absurd reactionary concepts of impoverished socialism, or transition to a higher stage in poverty, or making a revolution in poverty, touted by the Lin Biao and the Gang of Four. But we are also opposed to the idea of turning China into a welfare state, because right now this is impossible. We can only improve our standard of living gradually on the basis of expanded production. It is wrong to expand production without raising people's standard of living, but it is likewise wrong and impossible to raise people's standard of living without expanding production." That's Deng Xiaoping theory, right? And that the understanding is that the way to create an egalitarian society is to create an abundant society. Why is it that we had, feudalism and slavery? Was it people were just evil back then? No. It was that was the level of development that we had. Human productive forces were at that level. And why was it that starting in Europe in like the 1400s, people started to say, we ought to have freedom of religion and human rights? Why? Well, that was because a level of new abundance had been created by the rise of the mercantile classes that gave way to a level of freedom. Freedom and development, and freedom and technological progress and abundance are intrinsically tied in together. And so what China is trying to do is to raise productive forces so they can become a more free and open society, and to cooperate with countries around the world on the basis of win-win cooperation so that they can do the same thing. All right. Now, Carter asked, Caleb, can you go into great detail about the Iron Curtain communist countries and which countries built the best state? Hungary, Romania, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Poland, Germany, Hoja. Well, I'm not going to play favorites. I mean, all of those countries had their limitations. All of those countries had amazing achievements in terms of economic development, which they'll never tell you about, right? I mean, all of my writings from when I was in the Workers' World Party, basically all the writings before CPI Open started. I wrote a book. I compiled them into a book called Capitalism Must Be Destroyed. Because I wanted to preserve them, but they also don't represent where I currently stand. And I knew some of them have already been deleted. They're trying to, erase me from the history of their organization. They're very embarrassed that I was ever part of their group because they're a Trump derangement syndrome group now. And because of that, I saved the articles and I republished them in this book. And I wrote a couple articles about Romania. Because Romania is a country that, is a formerly communist country. And, this is the book if you want to see some of my old writings. And I wrote a series of articles called Even CIA Statistics Show, where I used CIA fact book data from the CIA World Fact Book to argue that imperialism is, not good. I talk about Libya's achievements, talk about Cuba's achievements using CIA data. These are all the articles I wrote, during the Occupy Wall Street protests and all of that. And you can see my views start to change towards the end, and this book, I wrote an introduction to it. And, if you want to know where I came from, and then I have an end, an appendix kind of showing, this is when I was in the Workers' World Party. This is all the articles I wrote. So if you want to give it a read, if you want to read, a lot of the articles I wrote are just defending, governments in Eastern Europe and stuff like that. And I have an article in there about Romania and about the economic achievements of socialism in Romania. And I pulled it largely from the from the U.S. Library of Congress study of countries that's full of economic data, and I just pulled their statistics on governments. It's blocking the link, so you have to go on the Rumble if you want the link. I'm trying to post a link to that book on YouTube, but it doesn't like it. It doesn't like it, which is odd, very odd. I guess it let it go through over here, but it wouldn't let it go through. That's odd. But anyway, yeah. Hungary. I guess I'll just pull up the statistics about Romania, right? I mean, we just want to talk about Romania. What did they achieve? I mean, let's just go over the facts. Again, you'll meet a lot of people, who say, oh, communism was just utter hell on earth. Well, it had big problems. I mean, it wasn't a free and open society. There was a huge amount of authoritarianism, but, this is from the U.S. government, what I'm about to read you, right? All right, hold on. All right, here we go, right? This is from the U.S. government. This is from the U.S. government country study. All right, hold on. Between 1951 and 1971, the number of hospital beds per 1,000 people in Romania more than doubled. The number of doctors per 1,000 people increased by 25%. The infant mortality rate was reduced by more than 75% between 1950 and 1984. In 1945, only 27% of people in Romania were able to read and write. By 1966, illiteracy was eradicated, according to the U.S. country study. By 1970, the number of teachers in Romania had tripled. The number of university professors in Romania had gone from only 2,000 before World War II to 13,000. Right there. I mean, that right there tells you how amazing socialism is. I mean, as much as Ceausescu had issues, as much as you can criticize, they didn't have material goods, they didn't have the commodities, right? They couldn't drink Coca-Cola, consumer goods they didn't have, and there was a lack of civil liberties. But if your country goes from having what was it? They went from 27% literacy to universal literacy. That's big. The number of hospital beds doubled. The number of doctors increases by 25%. Infant mortality goes down by 75%. They go from having 2,000 university professors to having 13,000 university professors. That's huge. And people poo-poo that. It's like it doesn't matter to people. Again, people who've never, I guess they've never seen the parts of the world where people don't have running water, where people are illiterate, where people don't have access to medical care. One of the first times I ever started to realize that what we were told about communism was a load of bullcrap was when my family, in Ohio, I was a kid in Ohio, there was a college near where we lived, and we hosted a student from Bulgaria. He was a college student from Bulgaria, and he was not a communist. And I remember I asked him one time, I said, is there anyone in Bulgaria who still believes in communism? And he says, yes. He said, yes. And I said, who? And he said, my grandfather. And I said, why does your grandfather still believe in communism? He lived under it. He knows how bad it is, right? And he said, no. He said his grandfather remembers how after World War II, he was a young man. And at that time, Bulgaria did not have very many paved roads. And the government got all the young men of the country and sent them out to pave the roads. And thousands, all the young men of the country went out and paved the roads of the country. And they went from village to village in the rural areas, in the mountains, and they laid the foundations, they laid the cement, and they paved the roads of the country. And they didn't get paid. It was volunteer work. But every village they went to, every town, they were greeted as heroes. And there was this spirit of optimism. We're going to build our country up. The war is over. We're a new country now. We don't have a monarchy anymore. We're a new country. We're building up. It's community power. It's communism. And under the leadership of the communists and, Dimitrov, the friend of Stalin, who had been the leader of the Communist International, who was the leader of communist Bulgaria, they went out and they paved all the roads of the country. And a country that didn't have paved roads suddenly had paved roads. And that, until the day he died, his grandfather loved Stalin. And he loved communism because he said, I remember how we didn't have roads when I was a kid. Then when I was a young man, we went and we built those roads. And it was an amazing experience that I will never forget. And again, I guess those of us who live here in America, we're spoiled, right? We've always had paved roads. What the fuck does that mean? Well, if you'd grown up in a country that didn't have paved roads, and then the communists came in and suddenly you had paved roads and hospitals, and, if you assumed you were going to be illiterate your whole life, and then the communists came along and provided literacy, you would think pretty highly of the communists. And in every single one of those Eastern Bloc countries, every single one, there is a very high rate of communist nostalgia. And in most of those countries, it is the majority say life was better before the fall. That doesn't mean they don't say there was problems, right? And some countries like Poland are doing a little bit better and stuff, but overwhelmingly in every former socialist country, poll after poll after poll shows, if not a majority, a very, very large minority, and usually it's a majority, says life was better before the collapse of communism. And that doesn't fit. That just doesn't fit what we've been told here in America. I mean, we think we know about communism because we met a guy down the street who grew up in Yugoslavia and said, "Oh, communism was horrible. I love America. I hate communism." Well, that guy came here, right? So that's why he thinks that. He came here. Like, and that, again, Soviet nostalgia is at an all-time high in the Soviet Union. They love Stalin. Stalin is wildly popular there since the special military operation, especially. But even before that, he was wildly popular. And Soviet nostalgia is very high in the Soviet Union. They're very proud of what the Soviet Union achieved. There's this arrogance. People think they know, we're taught communism never achieved anything. I think it did. It paved the roads. It did a lot. Brought universal education, literacy, built the hospitals, built the power plants. And then on top of that, we're told that everyone just is so happy that it fell. They were crying when it fell. Yeah, a lot of people were happy when it fell. And then their economies all got destroyed by George Soros, and everything got sold to the highest bidder, and there was sex trafficking and mass unemployment and hunger, and they were economically looted. And then they said, "Oh shit, we didn't know what we had." And the 90s was a pretty awful time in the former Soviet Union. There was a lot of Ukraine in the 90s that only had electricity for a few hours a day. So again, this is a part of the story you never hear. And again, there's this arrogance. People think they know. They don't know. It's more complicated. Does this mean that the Soviet Union was paradise? No. Does this mean that the Soviet Union had freedom? Absolutely not. They were a very authoritarian society. Does this mean that these countries weren't lacking in terms of material goods? And, of course they were. I mean, it's complicated. The truth is stranger than fiction, folks. Now, Carter's specific question was about, are there any that were better? I mean, all these countries had their own character. All right. And I'm not here to say which one was better or which one was worse. I'm just not here to do that because that's not respectful. Right. Albania is interesting to me, because Albania was the only country that aligned with China against the Soviet Union 100%. And Albania tried to be completely egalitarian, and Enver Hoxha maintained he was holding on to Stalin's pure line. And so I've studied Albania, and I've read Enver Hoxha's works, and I'm curious about Albania. One thing that I think is interesting is, there are a lot of American Albanians. And Albania is largely a Muslim country. I mean, it's about half and half, about half Christian, half Muslim. Albania is the only atheist state ever declared, right? The communist countries officially just had no position. They were separation of church and state. But Albania was the only country in history to have ever declared officially an atheist state. The reason they did that is because it's half Christian and half Muslim, and they didn't want those two groups fighting each other. So they basically tried to stamp out religion entirely. However, and this is fascinating to me, I've talked to Albanians in America, and Albanians in America have pointed out to me that Enver Hoxha's Albania, even though it was completely atheist and you could go to jail for owning a Quran or a Bible, I mean, it was really, really, really strict atheism. Still, it was much more socially conservative, and women went to jail for dressing scantily clad. And, it would, like, abortion was completely illegal. Don't even think about it. And, it was like, and that's one thing that, like, Muslims in Albania frequently point out. There's a lot of fanatical Muslims in Albania, and they will frequently say, we were more in line with Islam and its teachings when we were an atheist state than we are now, which I think is kind of funny. But that's actually, there's Albanians here in New York City that have come here. And that's one thing. Every time I meet an Albanian, I meet a lot of Muslim Albanians, and one thing, a lot of them hate communism, but one thing they'll say is we were more Muslim under communism than we are now. And they'd say, under communism, it's weird. They said Enver Hoxha didn't believe in God, and Enver Hoxha was a strict dictator. It wasn't a communist. There wasn't a Muslim at all, and all that. But we were a more moral society. Gambling was illegal. It was like, and that if you're a conservative in Albania, if you're a conservative Muslim in Albania, Enver Hoxha's government is more, in line with, and that I find to be very interesting. But another thing that happened is that all of these countries, not all of them, but many of these countries Romania, Poland, they started cutting economic ties to the Soviet Union and getting closer to America in the 80s. And that was a strategy. Poland and Romania both got in debt to American banks. And, and that was not good for them. And that the strategy of the late Cold War, I mean, starting in the late 70s, you had a policy where the USA was trying to separate. This was Brzezinski writes about to separate what they called satellite countries from the Soviet Union, create distance. And so that's why Jimmy Carter's brother became Gaddafi's drinking buddy, Billy Carter, and was always partying with Gaddafi. And that's why Cuba, you had the Mariel boat lifts, right? And Jimmy Carter let Cuba send all kinds of people to the United States and empty their jails and their mental hospitals and send them all to the United States. And that there was a big effort by Jimmy Carter's administration, but even it continued under Reagan to do favors and cozy up to Romania and Poland and countries like that, and Cuba and Libya, and pull them away from the Soviet Union. That was a really big part of, late Cold War strategy on the part of the United States. And it was effective. It was very, very effective. And I think that is actually still the strategy of the Democrats. That's kind of a main difference you'll notice between the Democrats and the Republicans in terms of foreign policy, right? Biden didn't want to really fight Venezuela. He wanted to fight Russia and China. And if he had to be nicer to Venezuela, that was fine, because that would pull Venezuela further away from Russia, right? Biden didn't really want to fight Iran. He wanted to fight Russia and China. So a nuclear deal with Iran, that'll make Iran closer to us, further away from Russia and China. Democrats, their strategy is they tend to be nicer to what they call satellite countries, smaller anti-imperialist countries, while trying to isolate and surround the major ones, Russia and China. Whereas Republicans, they are more tied in with the military, and you're not going to go to war with Russia and China because then nukes go off. So they want to threaten and surround countries like Venezuela because they can go to war and unload the bombs or whatever, and they want to leave Russia and China alone, right? And that is, again, that's an exaggeration. It's not that simple, right? But that tends to be a difference. The Brzezinski school of foreign policy is suck up to the satellite countries and isolate and try to weaken and threaten the major country, especially the Soviet Union, but now Russia and China. Whereas Republicans tend to want to carry out military operations, and military operations have to be against satellite countries. So there you go. All righty. Now, Gabby sent a question. She said, how do you talk to Palestine protest organizers about the fact that their actions, while passionate, don't seem to lead to real structural change? How can CPI help address this by engaging with pro-Palestine protesters who may be showing up for the wrong reasons or treating it like a trend instead of a movement? I'm honestly exhausted by the left and the right. The right loves to celebrate when people lose SNAP and EBT benefits during government shutdowns, yet they never question Israel, a Zionist state, gets a massive amount of taxpayer money. The hypocrisy is unbelievable, and it pisses me off. Well, that's a really good point to make. I would say that there are two types of Palestine protesters. All right, we just got to be real about this. There are two types of Palestine protesters: wokes and Muslims. And my advice, talk to the Muslims. Don't talk to the wokes. The wokes are crazy. They're brainwashed by the internet. Oh my God. I can't go to any one of these rallies without one of these wokes coming up to me. Oh my God, I heard on the internet that you're a rapist and a pedophile. And they're crazy, right? And they don't think. They're brainwashed by their phones and all of that. And they don't have that much money and resources. They're not bringing their whole family to the rally. They got pink hair, and they've got their transgender for Palestine flag and their nose ring. And, this is a phase they're going through. And, in a couple years, they'll quit PSL and they'll grow up and they'll get a job and, whatever. Right. I hate to say that. It sounds condescending, but there's no point in talking to woke people. They're crazy. They're traumatized. They're not talking about facts. They're trauma brained. Oh my God, I'm triggered. That's what they're doing. They're not thinking. You can't, it's in one ear out the other. They're hysterical, and they especially anything CPI. They hate CPI. I mean, it's kind of like a vampire in the old vampire movie. You hold up the cross and the vampire goes. That's how they are with CPI. So just don't talk to the woke people. Talk to the Muslims, because the Muslims can't stand the woke people on some level. Muslims don't believe in abortion. Muslims don't believe in gay marriage. And Muslims are constantly saying to the Palestine movement, why don't you make more rational arguments? And the Palestine movement is run by Brian Becker and Zoran Mamdani and Ilhan Omar, and they are, nope, we're going to be woke. We're going to be woke. And the Palestine movement, does that. And a lot of the Muslims are like, we just care so much about Palestine. They are sincere. They actually care about Palestine. And so they go along with it. Talk to the Muslims. Talk to the Muslims. And also the Muslims tend to be more familiar with the actual international situation. They know the Houthis, for example, are the best friends of the Palestinians. They know Iran is a key ally of the Palestinians. My advice, talk to the Muslims. Don't talk to the woke people. Woke people will grow out of it in a few years, and ex-woke people will drift into our ranks. I mean, for a fact, there are people who used to be around PSL, used to be in communist groups, who've joined us. There's many people that were woke 5 years ago, woke 3 years ago, and joined CPI. And I think we are very much, when people grow up, right, when they realize that the world is not a shrill internet meme, but the world has, and that when people are actually forced to confront the reality of like actually trying to make real political change, they're forced to, we're a good place that they can go. But, but I would say, if you're going to talk to Palestine protesters, talk to Muslim Americans, show them our book on the Houthis, talk about populism, talk about food stamps, talk about a more winning strategy, talk about out of the movement to the masses. And I think a lot of Muslim Americans will be sympathetic to you, right? That's what I think. That's my advice. But when people are, in their woke trance and they're just rage porning, I don't know. It's sad. The internet is very, very good at triggering people, showing people horrific images, making them upset, and after Trump was elected president, I remember like a week after he took office the first time, there was a drone strike. And, CNN covered it as if there hadn't been drone strikes for the entire 8 years of Obama's presidency. Obama was killing children with drones daily, as if Bush hadn't done that in the final years of his presidency. But the U.S. media covered it, and they showed it was pretty horrific, some innocent child being killed. And I had a whole bunch of people inboxing me. Oh my God, Caleb, did you see what Trump just did? He murdered this child. Oh my God. I can't believe that you would not be going to stop Trump rallies. Look at this poor innocent child. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. And then I would say to them, that's bad. I'm against the drone strike program. It's illegal under international law. And you do realize Obama was doing this for 8 years, right? And they'd say, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Oh my God, Caleb, Trump is Hitler. And I'd just be like, okay, it's awful. What you're showing me is awful. It's very awful. But how does that compute to, therefore, Trump is the worst thing that has ever happened, and we should join the Democrats who are going to do the same thing? It doesn't add up. Yes, 2 wrongs don't make a right. That's true. Yes, just because somebody else did something bad doesn't make it okay. Yeah, I'm not saying that, but but the thing is, and what I don't get, what pisses me off, is these people are so damn stupid. I'm sorry, I'm getting fired up here, but these people, it's like they can't figure out CNN. There were a bunch of children that Obama did the same thing to that CNN didn't show you. Okay? Like, why is this so hard to understand? CNN showed you that to you so you would get upset, and they didn't show it to you when they didn't want you to get upset. You're being manipulated. It pisses me off that people can only be outraged when CNN tells them to. Suddenly people grow a moral compass as soon as CNN gives them permission. It really pisses me off, right? That people get all self-righteous the second that the establishment tells them to feel a certain way, then they feel they're not outraged about things unless it's so infuriating. Obama destroyed the most prosperous country on the African continent, and the communists all supported it. They all supported it. They either supported it or they did nothing about it. You know? And when Obama was bombing the hell out of Libya, when the most prosperous country in Africa was turned into ruin, they didn't show videos on CNN of little girls crying. And so nobody cared. But the second Trump took office, because Trump, there's some illiberalism there. As Trump has been a huge disappointment, but there's some illiberalism there. They show it, and these people just jump on command. And it drives me up the wall. And it's just, these people are just so easily manipulated. They can't see they're being manipulated. And that doesn't make what Trump is doing okay. It's just that you should be able to think for your goddamn self. It was wrong when Obama did it. And it was just as wrong, even though CNN didn't flash it in your face. And it infuriates me. It gets me fired up. It really, really gets me angry that people get morally outraged on command. And the other thing is, you're not a hero if you only get outraged on command. Right? You're a hero when you think for yourself and question what the government's doing. You're not a hero when you follow the crowd. And so many people seem incapable of doing anything but following the crowd. And yeah. Next question. There's a couple Rumble rants, one from Penny and one from Hempcar. Hempcar said, "What's the Winnie the Pooh thing with Xi Jinping in China? It's a dumb meme. It's a dumb meme invented by people that don't like the Chinese government. And it's dumb. Like, who cares? Who fucking cares? Doesn't matter. That's what it is. It's that people who don't like Xi Jinping are trying to infiltrate Chinese social media and it's stupid. It's stupid and not worth our time. Not even really worth discussing here. It's dumb. All right. And then Penny says, China Rail Bridge. Let's put the video on. I have to download Penny's video about the China Rail Bridge. China Rail Bridge. All right. China Rail Bridge video from Penny. And then I see Mirden has sent in another buy me a coffee. So yeah, we got another question, but yeah, we'll do the China Rail Bridge from Penny. All right, China Rail Bridge video. This is a video Penny sent in. I love how Penny follows like all the positive, optimistic news coming out of the anti-imperialist countries. I love that. She all about, she gets it. Penny gets it, right? That we're about building and CPI and all of that. Here we go. Oh, high-speed railway bridge. That's pretty damn cool. That is absolutely awesome. That's great. Thank you. That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Videos like that give me hope. And that's what it's all about. Building. We are city builders. All right, Mirden says, thoughts on Zionist propaganda angle that demonizes Palestinians for thinking in 3.5 dimensions by building tunnel networks to protect themselves, as if that is sinister crime opposed to being saturation bombing. You lost me there, man. They're saying that Palestinians think in different dimensions? What? I've never heard that. Just like how redcoats would complain about how the Continental Army auxiliaries or whatever were lining up and waiting to be shot at the surrender of Cornwallis. Cornwallis was a mountain greatest of all time who is wise beyond his years. That's interesting. I haven't actually heard that. I do know that is like what is it? That's the right. You know, I mean, it's like it's just a very, very consistent theme in I don't know what you want to call it, pro-imperialist, or whenever the other side wins, they're cheating, right? Eric Hoffer wrote this whole book that I quote in my Khrushchevism book, called The True Believer, and it's all about how mass movements are cheating, right? Because mass movements, if people can't become a great religious leader, if they can't become a regular politician, they build a mass movement, and that's cheating. That's just their failures. They're like redundant people who just couldn't win through the regular church and couldn't win through the regular politics, so they built a mass movement and they're cheating, right? Or it's like how they say, well, Venezuela's not a democracy, even though Maduro won the elections. It's not a democracy because he won somehow. It's like you can't do it. But Mirrodin, in honor of you, I know the Irish struggle is very close to your heart. This is a song. This is an IRA song. That it's an obscure one, and I had never heard it. A friend of mine named Mike, shout out to Mike, he's in Florida if he's watching. He sang it to me years ago, and I was like, really? I had never heard it before. And it was years before it was available on the internet. So I almost didn't believe him this was really a song until finally somebody put the album on the internet. I'm sure you know this song, Mirrodin. It's a classic IRA song. It's about an explosive, right? There's a lot of IRA songs about weapons, right? There's a song about My Little Armalite, right? And this is an IRA song about a bomb, basically, about an IED. An improvised explosive device. And I'm going to play it. I find it to be amusing. I mean, obviously we don't like political violence, but the IRA, the people in Northern Ireland in the 70s were in very different conditions than we're in right now. And I think, it was a different time, and it's certainly an amusing anthem. So I'm going to put on this song. It's a song about an IED, an improvised explosive device. It's an IRA, a pro-IRA song from one of the pro-IRA bands called the Men of No Property. And as soon as it finishes downloading, I will put it on. It's a classic. It's certainly a classic. Certainly a classic song, and it was obscure for a while. And it's a song I actually just thought of it today. I was in the shower. And I thought of this IRA song. I hadn't listened to it in a while, so I thought I would put it on. As soon as it's done downloading, I don't know what's taking so long. As soon as it's done downloading, I will put it on. So if my computer could hurry up, right? There we go. Who do you want me to debate, Anway? Who do you want me to debate? Who do you want me to debate? My goodness, it was downloading just a second ago. It was downloading, and then it just stopped, right? It's just freezing. Let me try another site. Hold on. Who does Anway want me to debate, by the way? I'm curious. While we're waiting for the song to download, maybe Anway can tell me who I'm supposed to debate. I've debated before, and I would do it again. I mean, I don't know. I kind of get sick of internet culture and stuff, but yeah. Oh, here we go. Okay. Is it going to download here? Oh, okay. Here it goes. I got it from the other site. I don't know what went on at the other site, but here we go. All right. This is a classic old-timey IRA song. Here we go.
They came down the Bannon warship sailing out from Belfast town. The RUC and specials to put the riot down. They flattened out like lemons on the ground they had to hug when there came a loud explosion from the Bogside Doodlebug. Run back, we're under fierce attack. A hoist away flag, William, the sergeant sadly cried. It was the Bogside Doodlebug, the poor man he had spied. Now this missile of the people was invented by a man Unemployed for 14 years when his good work he begun. Says he, it's no use begging on, for work we'll have to fight. So I'll invent a weapon that will make the peeler shine. Run back, we're under fierce attack. Hoist the white flag, William, the sergeant sadly cried. It was the bauxite doodlebug, the poor man he had spied. Now the doodlebug's a weapon quite easy for to make. Just get yourself some petrol and some powder and some paint. It's the pride of all the bauxite and the fear of the man in blue. Aye, for when it hits an armoured car, it sticks to the side like glue. Run back, we're under fierce attack. Hoist the white flag, William, the sergeant sadly cried. It was the bauxite doodlebug, the poor man he had spied. Now the peelers used their buttons and the specials used their guns. They come roaring through the bauxite like the bloody German Huns. They all run back like cowards, they knew what lay in fate when the music of the doodlebug was heard at Butcher's Gate. Run back, we're under fierce attack. Hoist the white flag, William, the sergeant sadly cried. It was the bauxite doodlebug, the poor man he had spied. Now to conclude this truthful story, look up to the sky at night. You'll see an object passing by going at the speed of light. It's not a lunar module or Aladdin's magic rug. It's the discrimination wiper out the bauxite doodlebug. Run back, we're under fierce attack. Hoist the white flag, William, the sergeant sadly cried. It was the bauxite doodlebug, the poor man he had spied.
So there you go. The doodlebug's a weapon that is easy for to make. All it takes is petrol, gunpowder, and some paint. I find that to be hilarious, right? Anyway, maybe I shouldn't think it's funny, but I don't know, whatever. That's an old IRA song, and somebody sang it to me like I should know it, right? Years ago, my friend Mike sang it to me like, come on, you know this song, don't you? I said, no, I've never heard this. He's like, I'm like, no, I don't know this. And finally, I found out what he was referring to. Heard it on the internet. Very, very funny. But there you go. So as far as the debate question, look, I tweeted something today and then I deleted it because whatever. I mean, it's not worth it. But, I think the people who needed to see it. But I'll just say this, right? A couple things about debating. First of all, right? The person that you all mentioned there, look, I invented ACP and I transcended ACP. ACP is people doing a cheap social media imitation of what CPI was doing 4 years ago. We are way past that. And when we were doing that, we were doing it for real. We were not, LARPing. We actually were doing it. Like we had days of action. We actually did stuff. We went out and met people. We did real outreach and stuff like that. They are a social media brand that is doing an imitation of what we were doing 4 years ago. And, that's shitty. And it's basically a government operation against CPI. They are really nervous about people becoming actually anti-imperialists. So they created like a barrier. They blew up some people on social media. And they made them like a barrier against CPI. And that's all there is to it. And that's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious certain people don't know what they're talking about. It's also pretty obvious that certain people are being boosted. When the Israeli government tweets out April Fool's jokes about people, it's not because they just really don't like them. I don't think that's what it is, and I continue. There's probably people watching this right now who insist that's not the case. That's not true. Oh no, this person is so cool on the internet. Fine, go. If you don't understand why what we're doing is real and why what they are doing is cheap social media performance art, then you're not for us, right? We're not trying to be popular. We're trying to build a cadre of people to carry out real operations. The No Kings rallies happened, right? And the Democrat Party just had a big day of action. So what did we do? We went there, you saw the video, and we disrupted those rallies to say hands off Venezuela. And what did they do? Crickets. Trump and Putin had a meeting in Alaska. And what did we do? We were out in the street in 8 different cities supporting the peace talks. And what did they do? Crickets. I mean, we're actually interfering in politics. We're going out and intervening in the political struggle. And we are constantly organizing workshops and meetups to solidify our own ranks. And then we are deploying our people out to do real stuff. And they are being really cool on the internet. They are just so cool on the internet. I mean, they're just so amazing, right? And they're just so amazing on the internet. So okay, good for them. And they go to other people's stuff and volunteer and take pictures of themselves, which is not building infrastructure. That's not real. You're not building a real construction of mutual aid. They're just social media performance art. And we're the real thing. And the government is boosting them. The Israeli government, not even just the US government, the Israeli government is boosting them. And they have defamed me. They have said awful things. And if I were to debate that person, which I won't do, if I were to debate that person, it wouldn't be a debate about politics because his whole shtick is to pretend he agrees with me. It would be a debate about me being a bad person. And that was the other point I was going to make. Do you remember the debate I did with Jason on Ruhe? I debated Jason on Ruhe. Complete waste of time. And it got a lot of views, and it was a complete waste of time. I horsewhipped him down Main Street. But I started out the debate reading to him about, what the point of being a communist is, supporting people in anti-imperialist countries. And he didn't want to talk about that. He wanted to have a debate about you're a bad person. And a debate about me being a bad person is not a productive debate. His argument was basically you're a narcissist, you like yourself too much, you're actually right wing, you're not a real left. None of it was productive. I wanted to have a debate that somebody would actually learn from. And Jason, sadly, wanted to have a debate about you're bad. And I kept trying to get the debate on topic, and he just kept trying to have the debate be about, well, you're bad. So, you can't debate with such a person is not very productive, right? But that's fandom. Whether I'm good or bad or not has no relevance on whether my arguments are correct. Did you know that? Bad people say true things. And good people say false things. Sometimes unintentionally, perhaps, but, and that debate I had with Jason, which got so much attention, my God, so many views and so much, it was a complete waste of time. And, Jason, it's really tragic what's happened to Jason. And I'm mad, not at Jason, but at what they've done to Jason. Jason was a sincere person. He's not a plant. He was a real person. He's a Canadian dude who got into communism. A chronically online Canadian dude who got into communism. And when nobody was making YouTube videos about communism, he did. And I remember in 2013, 2014, when he was at kind of the height of his popularity, it was the most trendy thing. Any communist meetup, anything I went to, oh my God, have you seen Jason? He's so cringe. He's so awful. And I said, hold up. I would always defend him. And I would say, he's doing it and you're not. More people listen to him than listen to you, than listen to any of the communist groups. Maybe we should learn from him. Maybe we should be making videos like he is. And I would defend him. And back in the day, he did some decent stuff. He did, DPRK week, where he would debunk the lies about North Korea. That was neat, and he would just debunk the lies about North Korea. On Libya, in the speech that Gavin gave at the CPI convention, he praised Jason because Jason was wrong about Libya. At first, he didn't support Gaddafi, but then he changed his position and actually switched to supporting Gaddafi. Jason, he was a real sincere person, a security guard in Canada, a guy who's a security guard in Canada who got into communism and was sincere. He never was in an organization. He was never an activist. And so he doesn't know what it means to organize, which, I mean, he's not the only one. Neither does the ACP, neither do any of these people, right? I'm really lucky, honestly, that I was in the Workers' World Party for 8 years because I at least learned what it meant to be in a group, right? Most of these people, David knows what it's like to be in a group. I know what it's like. John McCarthy in Chicago knows what it's like to be in a group. Most of these people have no idea what it's like to even be in a group. They don't even, it's like they don't know any better, right? It doesn't, like, being in an organization, building, doing outreach, organizing events, carrying out operations. People don't know anything about that. The idea that being an activist could be anything other than just sitting on your computer and listening to shit, it's not their fault. They just don't know. They've never done it. Okay. You have to learn by doing, and some things you can't learn. But Jason, he was a sincere person, but they went after him like you wouldn't believe. I mean, the amount of cyberbullying, and he was doxxed over and over and over again. And oh my God. And I mean, he was just a target. Every internet libertarian and every anti-communist went after him. And then the communist groups, again, oh my God, did you see that guy on the internet? He's so awful. Well, he's doing it and you're not. More people are listening, but no one could be happy for him. As much as I was disappointed by a lot of his content, I mean, some of his stuff was just way off. The way he reacted to Shauna Sawant winning the elections in Seattle to say, oh, well, she's not a Maoist, so it doesn't matter. And, a lot of his stuff was way off, but he did some good work, and he was out there promoting ideas we all supposedly believed in. And the response to him was, all these people who didn't do anything, didn't have anywhere near the level of influence, just constantly, oh, he sucks. That was despicable. And I would always defend him on the grounds that he's doing it and you're not. As I was leaving the Workers' World Party, we got to be friendlier. I connected him with Press TV and arranged for him to start doing Press TV interviews. They were looking for someone to interview, and he went on Press TV, and he didn't always do a great job, honestly. But he was harassed endlessly. They doxed him. They went after him so viciously, and he cracked. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He cracked. I mean, and, I tried to stay friends with him as long as I could. I really did. But there were people sending him false information, and people would inbox him stuff, and he thought people were out to get him. And I mean, he cracked. And I mean, part of cracking is isolation, right? Sanity. Look, I really do believe that a lot of mental health is interpersonal. It's based on friendships, on interactions. You have to have other people that you talk to. If you're all alone and at your computer, your mental health is gonna go away, right? You need in real life interactions and relationships, right? That being chronically online or just being isolated, right? Schizophrenic people. One thing about schizophrenic people is they don't make proper eye contact, right? People who have schizophrenia, they're psychotic. They're not interacting with reality. And having interacted with a couple people that went psychotic, I've dealt with, they're in their own world. They're not communicating with other people. And if they were properly communicating with other people, they wouldn't be psychotic. And that, like, withdrawing into yourself, withdrawing into isolation, is not good for one's mental health. And as a result of being isolated, as a result of never actually being in a real organization, unfortunately, and as a result of doing good work, putting himself out there and saying what he believed, and just getting cyberbullied like you wouldn't believe. Year after year, they went after him. He cracked. And it's very sad. It's very sad. And it wouldn't have happened if he had joined a real organization, right? If he had been in a real group with comrades, carried out real operations, he wouldn't have cracked. But because he was all alone and he was putting himself out there in a way that was very brave, and he was targeted, just viciously targeted, he cracked. And I mean, his content these days is unwatchable. except when it's about me, which, I appreciate that. More videos about me. I mean, he always says dumb things about me, but, and it's really sad. And I recently he left a comment on this channel about Charlie Kirk. And I replied to it, and I don't know if he saw my reply or not. But he basically said, well, why are you, not happy about the death of Charlie Kirk? And I replied to him and I said, Jason, for years, they've been calling you transphobic. Is it okay for them to kill you? No reply. And I think he got it. Right? That was the slur on him, was that he was transphobic somehow. They went after him, and all the trans people were, oh, he's a fascist, he's a Nazi, he wears a uniform, he must be a fascist. And then he was mad at me for not supporting the death of Charlie Kirk. And I said, Jason, the woke internet people all think you're transphobic. Should they be able to kill you? No reply. Now, I hope I got through to him on some level, because he knows what it's like to have the woke internet people go after you. They went after him, and they went after him really hard, and he cracked. I don't know what to say. I mean, it's not a political thing. He's not in touch with reality. Yeah. His mind broke. Like he's not processing information properly, right? And he's got some kind of, like, he's in touch with the Jewish Bund, the Bundists, and he thinks there's like a pedophile conspiracy inside the American government, and he thinks I'm in a conspiracy with Haas to go after him or something, and he's not well, and it's very sad, and it shouldn't have happened. And as obnoxious as he was cracking, and as vicious and nasty as he's been to me, I don't blame him. I blame a lot of things. I blame, number one, the communist movement. This guy, he was out there. There was no BreadTube before there was BreadTube, before there was any of this. He was out there doing work for what they supposedly believe in. And instead of defending him, it was like, oh my God, that wasn't helpful. And that's a big problem with communist groups, right? It's like, like how, like, if you're a hipster and you like some obscure band and then they become popular, then they sold out and you have to hate them. It's kind of like that. No, anyone who's a communist who starts to become popular, immediately all the internet communists hate them. And it's really sad. But now, then there's a layer of, like, internet communists that have been created that are not genuine. People like Thought Slime and Vosh and all of that. And for some reason, that doesn't happen to them, right? So I don't know. It's this weird thing. I mean, Peter Coffin was, a genuine internet Marxist. They went after him too, very viciously. I love Peter Coffin. I consider him a good friend. I know whatever he's doing right now, I still love him, and I'm really appreciative of everything he's done over the years. But I mean, sincere people get viciously targeted. You're not allowed to be a sincere person. You're allowed to be a fraud, and you're allowed to not do anything about this. But if you're a sincere person, you do it. And the only way you can survive as a sincere person, you have to have an organization. You have to have an organization. If Jason had had an organization, he would have survived. He wouldn't have cracked. He would have had comrades to support him. He would have been involved in real outreach. He would have been grounded in the real struggles, and he wouldn't have lost it politically, and he wouldn't have lost it mentally. But he lost it because he was in isolation, divorced from actual struggle, and not in an organization. And, I hope that he, who knows? Maybe someday, by the grace of God, he can be rejuvenated. Who knows? And that goes for anybody. People can be redeemed. People can be redeemed. People go through shit. People go through phases where they can't be politically active. People get into a mental health state and all of that. Things are going to change when it gets to the point that people have to be in an organization. Let me repeat that. Things are going to change when it gets to the point of strategic equilibrium, when people have to be in an organization. Until then, people are going to, be watching online and stuff like that, and they're not going to get it. When people have to be in an organization, it's going to be a bit different. And that, it's funny because I usually think about this in terms of the Great Depression in the 1930s. But actually, there was an older woman, Code Pink activist, that I got to talk to on a trip I was on a few years ago. She goes back to the Vietnam years. And it was actually similar in that time because she said, there wasn't all this bickering. I mean, we didn't agree. There was certainly differences in the anti-Vietnam War movement. But we were all unified to some degree, and we got a lot more shit done because we really urgently needed the war to end. They urgently needed the war to end. And so on the basis of urgently needing the war to end, people learned to put aside their differences and their egos and carry out operations to try and make the war end. Well, we're not at that point right now. I mean, I'm just telling you right now in America, the political struggle, and especially people that are interested in our kind of politics, there's no necessity in any of it. It's intellectual intrigue, it's virtue signaling, but people aren't in the struggle out because they have to be. People are not in the struggle because they have to be, right? When people are in the struggle because they have to be, it's very different than when people are in the struggle because they're interested, because it's an intellectual exercise, because they're trying to prove something or whatever. So there will come a time when it will be a necessity that people are in an organization. And that is the time that CPI is preparing for. It's called strategic equilibrium. So there you go. Now, I guess I will urge you to read The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. There's a character in The Grapes of Wrath who is a cynical, fraudulent pastor. And at the beginning of the book, he's a drunk. He's a, he's a sex addict kind of, and he's a fraudulent pastor who goes around doing tent revival meetings, but he doesn't really believe in what he's doing. He doesn't practice what he preaches. And at the beginning of the book, when they're in Oklahoma, he's this like drunken, fraudulent pastor. And he makes a comment at the beginning of the book about how maybe God is the collection of souls, right? Maybe it's like all the souls of people combined is God or something like that. And then he shows up at the end of the book when they're all in California. And he's the leader of the union of the agricultural workers. And he's the leader of the agricultural workers. And he's leading all these farm workers, all these people who fled from Oklahoma to California and are being viciously exploited by the landowners. He's the leader of their union. And why? Well, he's good at leading a crowd. He's a preacher. He knew what to do about it. And he went from being this cynical con artist hypocrite to being the leader of the union. And he makes a comment. I believe he says what he said at the beginning about God being a collection of souls. And then he's killed. The company thugs kill him. But what John Steinbeck was referencing there is how the struggle changes people. And how in the right moment, people can step up and show their true colors. That guy was a cynic, a hustler, but then when it became necessary to organize people, and when there was desperation, these people were being viciously exploited and struggling, his skills could be put to use fighting for good. And there you go. And like, when I was in New Orleans in 2006, I went to New Orleans. And people talked about how in New Orleans, when the hurricane hit and all these poor African-American folks were left in New Orleans to die, do you know who started organizing to rescue the people that were trapped in their houses, the old people trapped in their houses, and to get food to people? The Crips and the Bloods. Right? And these gangs, these criminal organizations, drug dealing criminal organizations, when the moment was right, when people were desperate and struggling, those organizations suddenly stepped up to the plate and became organizations that could serve the community. So, again, the struggle changes people. And you have to be in the struggle. You have to be carrying out real operations. You have to have comrades to stay grounded. That's the first thing. None of this, you don't understand any of this. This is what I said in the introduction to the Khrushchevism book, okay? And, this sounds condescending, but you don't understand any of this if you're not an activist, right? You don't. If you're not involved in building an organization, if you're not carrying out operations, none of this makes sense to you, and it shouldn't make sense to you, right? It'd be like, giving a manual to somebody about how to fly an airplane, and they don't know what an airplane is, right? That all of this stuff is meant to serve a practice. And if you're not involved in that practice, it makes no sense. And then the universities, they have wild interpretations of Marx, right? Soviet Union wasn't socialist because socialism is actually blah, 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 blah. And that Marx, there were three different Marxes, the young Marx, the old Marx, and they've got all this shit that professors have invented that has absolutely nothing to do with anything. That if you're involved in this, if you're doing this stuff, it makes sense. But if you're not doing this stuff, you can't make any sense of it. And then professors come along and they've invented all kinds of academic hooey to try and tell you what it means, because it won't make any goddamn sense to you. Okay? And I'm just being real with you, right? If you want to understand Marx, you gotta read Marx. And honestly, and this is going out on a limb, and this will blow your mind. If you want to read good advice for being an activist, go read the epistles. I am dead serious about this. Go read the epistles. The New Testament of the Bible. First, you have the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then you've got the book of Acts, which is about the founding of the church. And then after that, you have all these letters. They're activist letters. They're organizing a movement, an underground movement against the Roman Empire of people that follow Jesus. And if you read the epistles, you will learn what it means to be an activist, right? Because that's what they were doing. It's in a different time, but the epistles, the Romans, the Galatians, the Colossians, the Philippians, go and read the epistles. And it's about the attitude that one should take when building an organization. It's about the way to hold an organization together. It's about, go and read it. It's about how to be an activist, how to live a life of struggle. That's what it's about. And if you read the epistles, it's not intended for people who go to church on Sunday. Right? It's not intended for people who go to church on Sunday. The epistles are intended for professional revolutionaries, people who give the whole of their lives to this movement. Right? And you read the epistles. It's about maintaining the right attitude. It's about holding an organization together, putting your differences aside. It's about keeping grounded and focused. Go read the epistles. Right? I mean, it's about how to be an activist. It's about how to be an organizer. Right? It's really, it's about how to be an organizer in a different era, in the epoch of slavery, in the epoch of the Roman Empire, in a time before there were there was anything in terms of a printing press or anything, but it is wisdom written by hand by scribes, letters from the Apostle Paul about how to be an organizer, how to be an activist. Check it out. That's my advice. But anyway, Gabby had another point. She wanted me to answer the part about EBT, right? So why are they celebrating EBT being taken away? Well, Gabby, unfortunately, I mean, I assume you know this, but so please don't interpret this as I'm not being condescending. I'm just, there's a whole thing picking on people who get EBT is like the oldest cliche among conservatives ever, right? The idea is, I work really hard to earn my money and I have to pay for my food, but this family that's poor because they have kids, the government gives them a food subsidy and they spend it on junk food and they're lazy. I was at the grocery store the other day and I saw this woman who has EBT and she's fat, she eats too much and she doesn't eat. It's the oldest disgusting cliche among the conservatives ever, right? And sometimes it's racial, but not always. It's got a racial undertone to it. During the Reagan years, the term welfare mother was popularized, and welfare, the majority of women with children who receive government assistance are white, but people thought of a black woman. It's not always racialized, though. They do it against poor low-income whites too, right? And it's a way to pick on somebody without challenging authority. It's kind of like what I was yelling about with foreign policy before, right? It's a way to, getting mad at a low-income parent who gets EBT is a lot safer than getting mad at your boss. It's a lot safer than getting mad at the police. It's a lot safer than getting mad at the government. It's a lot safer than questioning U.S. foreign policy. You're getting mad at people that have no power. And that's safe. And you don't have to challenge anything. You don't have to question anything you've been told. And it's easy. And they talk about punching down. That's what it is. It's punching down. And it's a really old cliche way of punching down. And it's lame. I mean, I don't know what more to say about it. I mean, it's lame, and yeah, if you oppose Israel, right? Like these people, Israel's getting money while low-income parents in the United States are not. Well, opposing Israel, you're going to have people that say, oh, you support terrorism. You're going to have people who say, oh, you're against the government. Oh, well, but if you just oppose low-income parents, there's no consequences for that. Right? It's interesting because I criticize woke a lot on here. And, but when this stream started, I criticized conservatives and libertarians a lot more. And there are certain mindsets that I don't think are particularly, how do I put this? Psychology and politics, they don't always line up, right? But at different times, different wings of the political system, different political movements, political parties will appeal to different psychology, right? There was a psychology I used to see among conservatives. I actually don't see it as much anymore. I know it exists, but it's kind of similar to what you're describing, where they are like constantly angry at people that they perceive as victims or weak. And I saw that a lot when I was in college, and they had this anger and they just couldn't feel sympathy for anyone, right? Police brutality wasn't real. It had to be the person's fault. If someone's poor, they must be lazy. And that, there just has to be, there can't be a victim. And what it really was these people were constantly pushing back in their own minds against the fact that they feel like victims. And they can't let themselves be aware of how much they feel that they are victims, how upset they are at the world. And so if they start to feel empathy for that Black person who's a victim of police brutality, or that, low income person, then they're going to open the floodgates of empathy for themselves, and they just can't do that. And in a lot of cases, it's because that would put them into a confrontation with an authority figure in their life. If it's a younger person, it would put them into a confrontation with their parents. If they're a woman, it would put them into a confrontation with their husband. And that, a lot of conservative families, I mean, I grew up in a small town, and I went to a college full of Republicans, and a lot of conservative families, you have like a dad, right, who listens to Fox News excessively, and the meal consists of the dad kind of lecturing the family on politics, and the dad is rather authoritarian, and the dad can be a bit of a jerk sometimes, right? Again, things have changed a lot, but this is how it was when I was in college. This is how it was in my little town. A lot of conservative families, you have the dad who is very, he's the head of the household, and he is very much into the Fox News universe, and he's also a bit strict, dishes out punishments, etc. And to feel empathy for that victim of police brutality, to feel empathy for that low income person, means not only disagreeing with that dad figure who's a bit of a dick, but it means suddenly acknowledging how much of an abusive dick that dad character is. And it means not just having a confrontation with that dad character about politics, but suddenly realizing that guy's an asshole to you. And for a lot of women who are married to that guy, to a lot of teenagers and college-aged young people that are living in the household of that guy, they just can't handle it. They just can't handle it. And I saw that a lot. Now, I don't see that as much anymore, because nowadays to be a conservative is different. And what I see a lot of, especially I live in New York City where people are liberal, the family structure has changed. A lot of things have changed. What I see a lot of now is people that are doing the opposite. They're constantly thinking that they are a victim. And they're constantly playing, they're not trying to protect themselves from any feelings of victimhood. It's the opposite. They're just constantly traumatized with, I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim. Oh my God, I'm a victim, I'm a victim. And the woke internet is victimizing them constantly. And the Me Too kind of people and the trans movement and all of that, the internet almost like brainwashes them with constant trauma about what a victim they are. And they're almost kind of addicted to thinking they're going to die, thinking that they're under attack, thinking that people are mean to them and want to kill them. And it's the opposite. It's not that they can't feel empathy because they must shield themselves from ever feeling like a victim. It's the opposite, is that they can think about nothing but I'm a victim, and all these people that are victims around the world, I'm going to be harmed just like them. And they can't, they just have this shrill, they're a victim. And I was like that. I'll be honest. When I was in college, I actually regret some of the interactions I had with people. There were times where I was like that, right? That was, and that was before social media really got going. I mean, there was Facebook and stuff. And it took me a long time to kind of realize that that's not a healthy way of being, and kind of break out of being that way. But that's, and that's much more common nowadays. The woke young person is not, they're a constant victim. They're a constant victim. They're constantly playing images of victimhood in their head. And that's also very unhealthy. So I don't know. And I don't know if that first one, but the EBT thing that you're describing, Gabby, that is, at least when I saw it, it was that. It was, I can be mad at this woman. I can't feel any sympathy for her. She must be lazy, because that will mean that I have to disagree with the conservative dad in my house. And then I'm going to have to acknowledge that he's a dick to me. And then I'm going to be in a confrontation with him. And, that's kind of what I interpret that as, right? But maybe I'm out of date, right? Because modern conservatives are a bit different, right? Modern conservatives, to be a conservative now means you're at odds with the establishment. Conservatives sympathize with Russia. Conservatives, conservatives question U.S. foreign policy. Conservatives question the vaccine and opposed authority. So being a conservative now is very, very different than what it was during the Bush years. So, but there is an edge to that, that economic conservatism. That, it's that Ayn Rand thing, right? Selfishness is a virtue, compassion is a form of weakness, right? And that, again, there's no consequences for being mad at a low-income mother who gets EBT. There are serious consequences if you're mad at Israel, if you're mad at, the U.S. government, if you're mad at the police, So there you go. Anyway, I hope this was all helpful. Thank you all for being here tonight. It's funny. I got on here tonight. I thought I wasn't going to be on for very long tonight. And here we are. We're way past the 3-hour mark. We're 3 hours and 23 minutes in. I hope people found this insightful. I'm not going to stream for the next 3 days at least. I've cut a lot of clips of previous streams, but the next 3 days I'm not going to stream. So look out for the clips that I'm posting. The next 3 days I will be otherwise occupied. Got a friend coming to town. Shout out to you. Headed to, another state to do something this weekend and, working on all kinds of different things. But dare to struggle, dare to win. I love you all. I really, really do. And we have something special here on this channel. I ain't going nowhere. So dare to struggle, dare to win. And yeah. All right. I am going to put on the closing music. We'll be back. We'll be back. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.